Chapter 1807. 1807. The ancestral tree of the 1807 Dragon Clan's treasure was mutated. Wang Xian floated in the sky and overlooked the entire sea of dragons. Each mountain peak contained a large number of treasures. With his yin-yang and five elements dragon eyes, he could see that there were thousands of longevity-level spirit trees. One could imagine how terrifying the treasures of the Dragon Clan would be. The group of girls entered the mountain peaks in high spirits, and searched for all kinds of treasures as though they were lottery winners. The dragons liked shiny items, and so did the group of girls. From time to time, pleasant voices could be heard. Wang Xian floated on the sea and smiled. He looked at the center of the mountain. That mountain peak should be the Dragon God Valley, the place of this divine kingdom. He looked at the divine kingdom that was floating behind him, and then looked at the broken mountain peak in the center. Wang Xian moved his body and flew directly towards the broken mountain peak. The strength of the divine kingdom of the Dragon God had completely exceeded Wang Xian's expectations. After entering the ocean, he sized up the interior of the broken mountain peak. What a huge volcano! This should be the largest volcano in the entire Transcendence continent. Wang Xian entered and looked at the extremely spacious interior. His face was filled with astonishment. The entire interior was like a flaming space. No wonder it could make the fire dragons of the dragon race so powerful. It could allow the dragon race to produce an endless stream of half-step godly state experts. It was all because of this volcano. Inside the volcano, there were many fire spirits. At least 100,000 fire spirits were frolicking inside like fishes. Just these fire spirits are a rare treasure. To the Firehammer race of the Dragon Palace, this is a huge opportunity. Wang Xian scanned his surroundings. Reporting to Dragon King, a mysterious treasure has been found here. At this moment, a shout was heard. Wang Xian was slightly stunned. His figure flashed and disappeared. Buzz. His figure appeared near the periphery of the Sea of Dragons. Beside him, a dragon guard was staring ahead with a face full of fear. Dragon King, look ahead! What is this? When the dragon guard saw Wang Xian, he pointed to the front and said with a face full of shock. The Sea of Thunder, the land of death! He looked at the huge words on the stone tablet at the side, and his eyes were sparkling. He looked into the Sea of Dragons, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. At the depth of more than 100,000 meters at the edge of the Sea of Dragons, the space in front of him was extremely mystical. A territory covered by lightning had an area of about 50 kilometers. The power of the lightning in front of them was emitting a power that made even Wang Xian's heart palpitate. The lightning was extremely strange. It shone brightly like branches. From time to time, there would be lightning flowers blooming. That's right! His gaze focused as he stared at the center of the lightning territory. A small tree, a 1-meter-tall tree, and only one trunk. Wang Xian realized that all the lightning came from this small tree. He hesitated for a moment, and reached his hand into the tree. Crack! Crack! The moment Wang Xian reached his finger into the tree, a terrifying destructive force was emitted. This caused Wang Xian's expression to change drastically. Buzz! At this moment, a strong suction force was emitted from Wang Xian's heart. This stunned him instantly. Following that, Wang Xian could feel the ancestral tree trembling. This? Is this another divine tree of the level of the soul-returning tree, eternal wood, and the Chanshu tree? Wang Xian's eyes were filled with joy. Wang Xian could be said to have witnessed the strength of the ancestral tree. It was able to absorb an eternal wood branch, a soul-returning tree branch, and the dying Changshu tree. This allowed it to unleash its original terrifying ability. Due to the existence of the ancestral tree, the Dragon Palace possessed the ability to revive from the dead. It was because of the ancestral tree that the Fire Phoenix Dragon Seed and Starwood Dragon Seed were born. Just the name of the ancestor of all trees showed how extraordinary it was. The incomparably violent lightning entered his heart and surged like energy. At this moment, in the distant Dragon Palace, the ancestral tree was trembling as if it had encountered something that made it extremely excited. The unceasing flow of energy caused it to emit a bright light. The ancestral tree, which was originally only a few dozen meters in size, was growing at a terrifying speed. The branches of the soul-returning wood, the endless branches of the tree, and the branches of the evergreen tree were also continuing to grow. Wang Xian could feel the longing and excitement of the ancestral tree. He slowly closed his eyes and sensed the changes of the ancestral tree in the Dragon Palace. At the bottom of the Sea of Dragons, the mystical Nirvana Lightning Sea, which was once called the Land of Death by the dragons and even the gods of the supernatural continent, was disappearing at a terrifying speed. The Nirvana Lightning Tree, which was located in the middle of the Nirvana Lightning Sea, seemed to have been pulled by an invisible force and flew towards Wang Xian. Buzz! The 5-meter-long Nirvana Lightning Tree flew in front of Wang Xian and directly sank into his heart. Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining the Nirvana Lightning Tree! At this moment, the system notification sounded. Another powerful divine tree! Wang Xian's eyes sparkled. The dragon tribe's harvest this time was simply too great. A divine tree was far more important than any other treasure. Buzz! At this moment, Wang Xian sensed that the ancestral tree in the Dragon Palace was growing rapidly. In just a few minutes, it had grown to a size of a few hundred meters. The endless wood, the soul-returning wood, the Vikhang tree, and the Nirvana Lightning Tree actually bore fruit after fruit. There were 2 fruits on each branch, and they were emitting a magical glow. These fruits are? Wang Xian was slightly surprised. He stared at the few fruits, and his heart was burning with passion. However, as he didn't see them with his own eyes, he didn't know the specific effects of the fruits. Shu Qing, Qing Yu, I will transfer the Dragon Palace here! Wang Xian could not hold it in any longer. He shouted at the girls around him and disappeared in a flash. With his current strength, he was comparable to a god who had ignited 2 wisps of divine fire. The distance of his teleportation could reach up to 20,000 kilometers. Such speed was also the ability of a god to traverse the void. When he arrived at the Dragon Palace, it only took him 5 to 6 minutes. After entering the Dragon Palace, Wang Xian immediately came to the Dragon King's Hall. The moment he entered the Dragon King's Hall, he saw the ancestral tree that was 400 to 500 meters in size growing above the dragon throne. There were 8 fruits on the ancestral tree. Each of the fruits exuded divinity. Sensing the energy of the 8 fruits, Wang Xian took a deep breath and took out the godhead of the dragon god to take a look. The energy in the fruits was no weaker than this godhead. Eternal fire embryo. After consuming it, one will obtain the origin of fire. Soul-returning embryo. After absorbing the souls of the dead, one can revive them. Taking the ordinary embryo improves one's comprehension and spirituality. Nirvana lightning embryo. After consuming it, one will obtain the origin of lightning. Hiss! When Wang Xian saw the abilities of the fruits, he took a deep breath. Heaven-defying, this was simply too heaven-defying. Not to mention reviving from the dead, improving one's comprehension and spirituality. Just by consuming the eternal fire embryo and the Nirvana lightning embryo, one would be able to obtain the body of origin. These fruits could be called one of the most heaven-defying fruits in the universe. Chapter 1808. 1808 1808 Berserk Dragon Species. I wonder how long it will take for these heaven-defying fruits to bear one. Wang Xian stared at these embryo fruits with burning eyes. After his previous research, he realized that the embryo fruits had an extremely important use. It could replace the divine spark and allow the dragon clan's dragon species to evolve. Now, there was only one true peak dragon species in the dragon clan, and that was Ao Yao. The thorn dragon seed was the most powerful dragon seed known to assassinate the divine dragon clan. The second was the starwood dragon seed. The starwood dragon seed evolved from the ancestral tree, and there was no record of such a dragon seed in the divine dragon clan. However, a dual-element dragon seed could definitely be called a peak dragon seed. However, the fire element of the starwood dragon seed was suppressed now. When they reached the divine realm, they would have a qualitative breakthrough and completely unleash the fire and wood elements. The third element was the fire phoenix dragon species. The fire phoenix dragon species was obtained by the Dragon Palace because of the phoenix. Although it only had one element, it was only slightly weaker than the peak dragon species in terms of strength. After that was the fire gold dragon species. The Fire Hammer clan was the strongest forged dragon species known to the Divine Dragon clan. It was also a peak dragon species. However, if they wanted to reach the peak dragon species, they needed to fuse with the divine spark of the metal element. The next dragon seed of the Dragon Palace was a very ordinary existence with a single attribute. However, among the other dragon seeds, there was a special existence, the Dragon Guard. The Dragon Guard was Aogien and the others who cultivated the Heartless Sword principle. Their strength could not be treated as ordinary dragon seeds. According to the strength of the Heartless Sword principle, if Aogien and the others could cultivate the Heartless Sword principle, they would definitely not be weaker than the Berserk Dragon seed. Unifying the supernatural continent and obtaining the Berserk Dragon species from the Dragon Palace will allow the Demon Combat Division to evolve into the Berserk Dragon species. The Berserk Dragon species required 3 attributes: fire, darkness, and lightning. Aochitian belonged to the darkness attribute. By consuming the inexhaustible fire embryo and the Nirvana lightning embryo, he could evolve into the Berserk Dragon species. I wonder what other treasures the dragon tribe has. Let's head over first. Wan Xian squinted his eyes slightly, and immediately controlled the Dragon Palace to move towards the location of the Sea of Dragons. A level 5 Dragon Palace did not have a long teleportation distance. It would take at least 2 days to get there. If the Dragon Palace wanted to upgrade to level 6, it would not be as easy as before. In the past, it would only require some materials. But now, upgrading to level 6 required 9 divine kingdoms with 9 different attributes. The difficulty of the upgrade had increased by more than 10 times. He could either forge the divine kingdoms himself, or he could plunder the divine sparks of other gods. Wan Xian could even plunder the divine sparks of other gods with his strength, not to mention forging them himself. However, where could there be any gods? He was already an invincible existence in the entire Transcendence continent. Buzz. 2 days later, Wan Xian moved the Dragon Palace into the Sea of Dragons. Around him, the members of the Dragon Palace had already plundered all the treasures in the Sea of Dragons. On a mountain peak located in the middle, behind the group of girls, there were all kinds of shiny gemstones. Beside them, Duan Jiming was forging all kinds of jewelry for them. Move all the treasures into the Dragon Palace. Wan Xian placed the Dragon Palace in the center and said to all the members of the Dragon Palace, "It's the Dragon King!" Prime Minister Gui and the rest responded immediately. "Xiao Xian, look at these jewelry. My God, there are so many shiny gemstones in the entire Dragon Clan. It's simply too beautiful." The group of girls flew over excitedly and shouted with joy. "Beautiful, beautiful!" Wan Xian looked over with a smile on his face. His gaze swept across the group of girls. Other than his beloved sister, the other 8 girls, Guan Shuqing, who had been with him the longest, had been with him for more than 10 years. More than 10 years of companionship had made it difficult for them to separate from each other. The Transcendence continent has been unified. Next, we can tour the entire Transcendence continent and bring you to eat all the delicious food and drinks on the entire continent. Wan Xian stroked the heads of the group of girls and said with a smile, "Wow, that's great!" The group of girls were excited. In the entire Transcendence continent, they had visited less than 1/5 of the places. In this world, the Dragon King was already the king. They could be said to be existences like queens who could tour the entire continent as they wished. This was undoubtedly the happiest thing for the girls who loved shopping and eating. "Brother, when are we leaving?" Xiao Yu said excitedly. "We will go out to play after we settle the matters in the Dragon Palace." Wan Xian pinched Xiao Yu's cheeks and was in a good mood. They could play without worries for a period of time. Prime Minister Gui used the resources we obtained this time to improve the strength of the members of the Dragon Palace. Also, call Ao Chitian over. Wan Xian held the hands of the group of girls and walked towards the Dragon King's palace. He transmitted his voice to Prime Minister Gui. It's the Dragon King! Dragon King, all the treasures have been placed in the treasury of the Dragon Palace. In addition, there are many longevity-grade spirit trees and spiritual herbs in the Sea of Dragon. We will expand the medicinal garden of the Dragon Palace and plant them. With the ancestral tree, we will have an endless supply of spiritual fruits in the future. When Wang Xian and the rest arrived at the Dragon King's hall, Prime Minister Gui led Ao Chitian over. All right, we will plant some spiritual herbs and spiritual trees that have yet to mature. Wang Xian nodded. You lead the members of the Dragon Palace to improve their strength. Chitian, come over here. Wang Xian instructed them and walked to the front of the dragon throne. Wow, how did the ancestral tree undergo such a huge change? It even grew fruits. The group of girls noticed the ancestral tree and were astonished. The current ancestral tree was a few 100 meters in size. It stood at the back of the dragon throne and looked extremely mystical. Wan Xian walked over and plucked the eternal fire embryo and the nirvana lightning embryo from it. Consume this. After passing the fruit to Ao Chitian, Wang Xian continued. Let's go to the dragon transformation pool at the back. It's the Dragon King. Ao Chitian nodded respectfully. The current Ao Chitian was less violent compared to when he first became a disciple of the Dragon Palace. He looked rather wise. However, this was only on the surface. It was only because he had been taught by the civil officials of the Dragon Palace over the past 10 years that he was filled with wisdom. When it came to a real battle, he was still the same Ao Chitian who fought against the heaven and earth. Enter the dragon transformation pool. When he came to the side of the dragon transformation pool and saw Ao Chitian consuming 2 embryo fruits, Wang Xian said to him directly. Yes. Ao Chitian jumped straight into the dragon transformation pool. Evolution Berserk Dragon Seed. Wan Xian looked at the information in the dragon transformation pool and directly upgraded Ao Chitian. Will it take a month? Looking at the time of the evolution, Wang Xian was not too surprised. He took out the information that Prime Minister Gui had just given him. The information was all about the resources that he had obtained this time. The dragon race had accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years. They had so many treasures that even Wang Xian felt a little terrifying. These resources can allow me to advance another level. Wang Xian was full of smiles. Chapter 1809. 1809 New Era, Glorious and Prosperous. Name Wang Xian. Race, Yin-Yang 5 Elements Divine Dragon, Mandragon Unity. Level, Longevity 8th Rank, the 4th Change of the Divine Dragon Transformation. Divine Crystal, 335421/100000000. Supernatural Ability, Ruling the Water Tribe below one's own level. Devouring creatures to extract divine crystals. Control of the 5 elements. Cultivation Method, Divine Dragon Transformation. Supernatural Ability, Soul Capture, Spirit Possession, Yin-Yang 5 Elements Dragon Eyes. Aspect, 5 Elements Millstone, Dragon Kingdom in the palm, Dragon Head under the heavens, Dragon Body of 10,000 miles, Yin-Yang Poles, Yin-Yang 5 Elements Alms Bowl, Divine Dragon Tail Swing. Domain, Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom. Dragon Palace, Level 5. Members of the Dragon Palace, 23,433. A month later, Wang Xian stood in the Dragon King Palace and looked at his attributes. His face was full of smiles. With the sun, moon, and stars in my hand, there is no one like me in this world. Wang Xian grasped the strength in his hand. Recently, his level had increased the fastest. After absorbing a large amount of resources from the Dragon Clan, his level had once again received a huge increase. Level 8 of longevity was very, very close to igniting the divine fire. With his current strength, he was completely comparable to a god who had ignited 3 wisps of divine fire. On this extraordinary continent, he dared to say that he was invincible. Ao Chitien's improvement should be over. He looked down at Ao Chitien's figure. His 20-meter-long violent body, fire, lightning, and darkness energy circulated around his body. Whether it was fire, lightning, or darkness, they were all the more violent of the 9 attributes. When the 3 attributes merged together, how terrifying would the power be? Roar! A low roar came from the dragon transformation pool. Ao Chitien, who was in a deep sleep, suddenly opened his eyes like an awakened demon. 3 Goyus slowly appeared in his extremely pale pupils. Fire, lightning, and darkness. 3 Goyu appeared in his eyes and were connected together. These mysterious pupils looked extremely strange. The 3 Goyu that were connected together also appeared on Ao Chitien's chest. An extremely violent aura came from his body. As expected of the strongest berserk dragon species in the Dragon Palace. According to the records of the Divine Dragon Clan, there were only 20 berserk dragon species at their peak. Now I have the Dragon Palace that has merged with the insect nest. I can give birth to a large number of berserk dragons. If I have enough fruits and godheads in the future, I can upgrade the Thunder Tribe to a berserk dragon species. Wan Xian sensed the violent power in Ao Chitien's body and thought to himself, "Greetings, Dragon King!" At this moment, Ao Chitien, who flew out from the Dragon Palace, shrunk to 2 meters in size and knelt down before Wang Xian. "Use all your strength to attack me!" Wang Xian's eyes flickered as he ordered Ao Chitien. "It's the Dragon King!" Ao Chitien nodded and clenched his fist. Crack! Crack! In an instant, an explosive sound was heard from his fist. The surrounding air began to explode. Bang! An attack with an endless destructive force was directed at him. Boom! Wang Xian raised his palm to block Ao Chitien's attack. His face was filled with astonishment. The strength of level 8 longevity is almost comparable to the ordinary attack of the dragon god back then. His full strength attack is comparable to a wisp of divine fire. Wang Xian's eyes were filled with shock. Ao Chitien, who was now at level 8 longevity, could rival a god with his full strength attack. It could be said that he was fighting against a god who was 3 levels above him. As expected of the dragon seed with the strongest attack power of the divine dragons, Wang Xian's eyes were filled with excitement. If Ao Chitien were to advance by 1 level, he would be able to easily slaughter the dragon god back then. The fruits on the ancestral tree could also be used to nurture a berserk dragon seed. He hesitated for a moment, but decided not to cultivate any more. Those fruits were too precious. He had to determine how long it would take for the ancestral tree to produce one, and then consider how to use it. Dragon King, Empress Feng Luan is here! At this moment, Lady Ao came to report. All right, I got it. Wang Xian nodded his head and gestured to Ao Chitien before flying into the Dragon King's hall. A month had passed. The Dragon Palace had absorbed the resources available to the Dragon Clan. The weakest one in the Dragon Palace had already reached the 1st level of longevity. All the leaders had reached the 8th level of longevity. The current strength of the Dragon Palace was 4 to 5 times stronger than the previous Dragon Clan. The unification ceremony of the Dragon Phoenix Empire? We have to go too. Speaking of which, we are the Goddess Elder group of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. Of course, we can't miss such a grand occasion. It just so happens that the Dragon Palace is almost done with their business. Next, we will begin our journey to the extraordinary continent. Wang Xian had just arrived at the Dragon King's hall when he heard the excited voices of the girls. Are you done? Wang Xian looked at Feng Luan, who was surrounded in the middle, and asked with a smile. How can it be so easy to unify the entire continent? 2 days later, the Dragon Phoenix Empire will hold a unification ceremony. After that, we will basically be done with it. Feng Luan shook her head at Wang Xian and said, Come over to the Dragon Palace for the grand ceremony 2 days later. Only then can it be considered as living up to its name. All right, I don't have to deal with the matters of the Dragon Palace now. I can relax for a period of time. Wang Xian nodded his head. I might be able to relax for a period of time as well. Feng Wan smiled mysteriously and said, If there's nothing else, let's head over now. Okay, sure. Wang Xian nodded his head. Let's go. Our goddess elder group will be appearing at the ceremony in 2 days. Let's hurry up and pick out some clothes. The group of girls spoke enthusiastically. Dragon Guards, Heavenly Aero Division, follow me to the Dragon Palace. Roar! 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 Soon, 9 dragons of level 8 longevity pulled a dragon pride out of the Dragon Palace. The Dragon Guards and 3,000 members of the Heaven's Aero Division followed behind them as they flew towards the imperial capital of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. The imperial capital was currently located at the peak of the Aotian Mountain, the center of the continent. Wan Xian and the rest sat in the middle of the dragon pride that was a few hundred meters in size. It was no different from a house. This was specially built by the Firehammer clan for their Dragon King and Dragon Queen. Although it wasn't as majestic as the Dragon Throne, with Wang Xian's current strength, he didn't need to care about these external objects anymore. In a day's time, the group arrived at the main peak in the middle of the Aotian Mountain peak. At this moment, countless people were gathered in the surrounding areas. The number of people gathered this time was several times more than the time when the Dragon Clan went to the Aoshan Empire. The entire area within a few thousand kilometers was abnormally festive. The Dragon Phoenix Empire unified the Transcendence continent, and all the creatures and experts of the entire continent came to witness this historic moment. When the 9 flood dragons pulled the Dragon Pride along, followed by the members of the Dragon Guard's Heavenly Aero Division, they arrived. Below, everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Soon after, everyone below bowed in that direction. This was the respect for the strongest person on the continent, and also the respect for God. Chapter 1810. 1810 New Era, glorious and prosperous. The Dragon King is here. I didn't expect him to attend the unification ceremony of the Dragon Phoenix Empire tomorrow. It's all thanks to the Dragon King that the Empress was able to stand at the peak again in only 10 years, and even unify the Transcendence continent. The Dragon King only rules the ocean, and the continent belongs to the Empress. I wonder what the relationship between the Empress and the Dragon King is. Seeing the people from the Dragon Palace landing on the main peak, everyone whispered among themselves. A month ago, when the news of the Dragon God igniting the divine fire to become a god and then being killed by the Dragon King on the spot spread to other parts of the Transcendence continent, it immediately caused a huge sensation. Hundreds of thousands of gods had not been born on the Transcendence continent. As for gods, they only had a vague understanding of them in the historical records. Even if they only had a little bit of information, they knew how powerful gods were and how high they were. Now that the Dragon God of the Transcendental Continent had become a god, he was killed directly. How could it not be shocking? In addition, there was news of a great battle here. The world-destroying attack that covered an area of more than 10,000 kilometers shocked everyone on the continent. In an instant, the name of the Dragon King of the entire Transcendental Continent was like thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. In order to express their respect for the Dragon King, countless forces had even built deity statues. In just a short month, the Dragon King's deity statues had spread throughout the entire Transcendence continent. This person was a living god of the Transcendence continent. He was an existence that could kill the Dragon God who had ignited the divine fire. Other than the invincible dragon race, the Empress' strength was also widely spread. The terrifying combat strength of a half-step deity could easily kill a powerhouse at the peak of the dragon race. No one had any objections to the Dragon King's announcement that the Dragon Phoenix Empire would unify the entire continent, and the Dragon Palace would be in charge of the ocean. In front of the power of the gods, they knew that they were no different from ants. If they resisted, they would only die. Moreover, everyone knew that the Dragon Phoenix Empress could be called the Eternal Empress. She was well known for her governance, and was deeply loved by the people. Dragon King! Dragon Queen! In the main hall of the lofty Heaven Mountain peak, Feng Yun bowed and shouted with a smile when she saw Wang Xian and the rest. The current fire cloud sparrow tribe was like the sun in the sky in the entire Transcendence continent. As the Empress's most trusted and closest subordinate, the Dragon and Phoenix Empire had unified the entire Transcendence continent. Their fire cloud sparrow tribe had similarly risen. Even if there were many forces that were stronger than the Fire Lark clan, they had to treat them with respect. After all, this was the Fire Lark clan that had waited for the Empress for more than 1,000 years and had almost been exterminated for the sake of the Empress. Wang Xian smiled and nodded at Feng Yun. He had always admired the entire Fire Lark clan. Personal guard Feng, please call Long Xiaotian, He Yuan, He Sui Qing, and Mu Kai over. Tell them that I have an invitation, Wang Xian said to her. For this trip, apart from seeing an empire standing at the peak, he also had to catch up with some friends on the mainland. After all, the Transcendence continent was not his home. He did not know when he would have to go back. Earth. It's the Dragon King! Feng Yun nodded respectfully, and walked out immediately. Xiao Xian, do you want to give Mu Kai, who once saved your life, a position? How about the Princess of the Empire? Feng Yuan looked at Wang Xian and asked him. Sure. Now that the Nine-God Empire has disbanded, let's make her the Princess of the Empire and enjoy a lifetime of wealth and honor. Wang Xian nodded his head. All right. This time, I will carry out a huge reform in the mainland. I will establish a power structure in the extraordinary mainland and implement democratic elections. Feng Yuan looked at Wang Xian and the group of girls before she said with a smile. Her words stunned Wang Xian and the group of girls. Reform? Democracy? Wasn't this imitating some of the order on Earth? If we do this, it will greatly weaken the rights of the strong. I'm afraid some of the family forces will be dissatisfied. Wang Xian was stunned for a moment before he continued. However, if we really do this, it will greatly promote the development of the supernatural continent. That's right. Doing so would shake the foundations of some powerful forces. However, there is a huge benefit. In this era, everyone can become a dragon. As long as one has talent, everyone can stand out. Moreover, once this is implemented, I don't have to go through so much trouble. I don't even have to manage it, Feng Yuan said with a smile. Her eyes were shining with an inexplicable luster. Imitating the management methods of some countries on Earth to manage the entire extraordinary continent, although it would completely break the rules of the extraordinary continent, she could foresee that in the next period of time, the strength of everyone on the extraordinary continent would receive a huge increase. By publicizing all kinds of cultivation methods and combat techniques, everyone could become a dragon. She had consulted Prime Minister Gui not long ago about this method and asked him to help her formulate a detailed rule. Prime Minister Gui was born on Earth. Later on, he studied all the books on Earth and was knowledgeable. He had given her great help in the reform aspect. With our abilities, we can indeed do it. This is a great blessing for the entire Transcendence continent. Wang Xian nodded his head in agreement. I haven't announced this yet. I plan to announce it on the spot tomorrow. Then I will start to establish departments. Those powerful forces and powerhouses can join each department. Firstly, there's the Law Enforcement Department, which is made up of a group of powerhouses. Secondly, the Regulatory Department can change the Demon Hunting Hiring Association to. Feng Yuan spoke with confidence. It was obvious that she had already made a plan this month. All right, just remember to stand guard tomorrow. Xu Qing and I will go and pick out tomorrow's clothes. After Feng Yuan spoke for a while, she pulled the group of girls and said, Sister Feng Yuan, help me pick out the clothes first. My father should be here. I will go and meet him. Ling Jianer said to them and left with a smile on her face. All of a sudden, all the girls left. He was the only one standing there. Wang Xian shook his head speechlessly. He sat at the side with a smile on his face and began to enjoy his tea. The peak of the Aotian mountain was the center of the central continent, the highest peak on the continent. In the past, the capital of the Aoshan Empire was located around the peak of the mountain. Its coverage area was about 3,000 kilometers. At this moment, on the bustling streets, Long Xiaotian, He Yuan, and He Suiqing were walking on the streets, touring this majestic region. The dense crowd of pedestrians made the surroundings seem a little crowded. Make way, it's the Fire Cloud Personal Guards. It's the members of the Fire Cloud Personal Guards. At this moment, voices came from the front, and more than a dozen Fire Cloud Personal Guards walked over. You must be Long Xiaotian, young Master He Yuan, and Miss He Suiqing. A group of Fire Cloud Guards walked over and said directly to Long Xiaotian and the others. Eh? It's us. They were slightly stunned and immediately nodded. The Dragon King invites you, please. The Fire Cloud Guards respectfully invited them. Chapter 1811. 1811 New Era, under glorious prosperity. The Dragon King invites you. When Long Xiaotian, He Yuan, and He Suiqing heard the words of the Fire Cloud Guard, they were slightly stunned, and then their eyes lit up with joy. The Dragon King invites you, Big Brother Long, Big Brother He, hurry up and go. When the young middle-aged man who followed Long Xiaotian heard these 4 words, his eyes revealed a strong envy, and he immediately said to them. The people around them were more anxious than the 3 of them. All right. Please lead the way, Personal Guard Huiyun. He Yuan, Long Xiaotian, He Suiqing and the other 2 nodded quickly. The Dragon King invited them. Just these 4 words were a supreme honor to anyone. It was the same even for He Yuan, Long Xiaotian, He Suiqing and the others. The last time they met was when the Dragon Phoenix Empire was established. At that time, it was already a great honor for them for Wang Xian to meet them. Now, their former friend and brother had become a god. He was the god of the continent, and the strongest person on the continent. Even the dragon god was beheaded. They were from 2 completely different worlds. However, they did not expect the Dragon King to send someone to invite them over this time. It was a great honor. The 3 of them looked at each other and walked towards the main peak of Aotian Mountain excitedly. Then, who are those 3 young men and women? Oh my God, they can actually make the Dragon King invite them over. Oh my God, what are their identities? According to rumors, before the Dragon King rose to power, he had a few friends in that vast area. Could they be those 3 people? They've reached the sky in 1 step, the Dragon King's friends, oh my God! Shocked and envious voices came from the surroundings. Even their backs were filled with respect as they looked at He Yuan and the others. Just as everyone was extremely shocked. At a lofty mountain peak where the previous 9 God Empires experts were located, more than a dozen Fire Cloud Personal Guards also arrived and found Mu Kair. When she heard the Dragon King's invitation, Mu Kair's mouth was slightly agape as she slowly nodded. Kair, go quickly. Don't let the Dragon King delay you. That's right, Kair. Follow the Fire Cloud Guards and hurry over. Beside Mu Kair, her father, who had ignored her and even used her for a marriage alliance, spoke respectfully to her. Around them, there were the gods, from the 9 God Empire who had heard the news. They were also extremely respectful towards Mu Kair as they said with friendly faces. Yes. Mu Kair nodded. She was still slightly uncomfortable with the friendliness and respect from her father and the surrounding experts. Especially recently, the gods, who were once high and mighty in the empire, had come over from time to send her gifts and greetings. She could hold them in her hands to prevent them from falling, or she could hold them in her mouth to prevent them from melting. She knew that all of this was because of the person she had once saved by accident, the Dragon King. The Dragon King had slaughtered the gods and unified the continent. With her current status, even a longevity expert would have to be respectful when they met. After all, a longevity expert who was high and mighty on the continent could be easily killed by the Dragon Palace. As he watched Mu Kair leave, the former experts of the 9 God Empire were also impressed by her luck. It was not an exaggeration to call her the son of luck. Dragon King, a few young masters and ladies have arrived and are arranged to be in the room next door. In the main peak, Feng Yun walked in and said to Wang Xian, "Are you here? I'll go over now." Wang Xian nodded and went straight to the room next door. When He Yuan, Long Xiaotian and the rest saw Wang Xian walking in, they were slightly excited and nervous. "Haha, why? Are you so restrained when you see me?" Wang Xian smiled and walked over. After a few conversations, they finally relaxed. The last time when Wang Xian destroyed the empire of 10,000 demons, he had found a longevity-level bloodline for Long Xiaotian. Now, his strength was close to He Yuan. Wang Xian gave them some weapons and equipment, and chatted with them for more than an hour. He still had to settle down his friends. "After the ceremony ends tomorrow and I bring a group of girls to tour the extraordinary continent, it's time for me to return to Earth." An hour later, He Yuan and the rest left. Wang Xian muttered to himself. When he walked out of the room, the sky had already darkened. Standing at the main peak, he could look down at the surrounding fireworks. The entire main peak had been transformed into the Empress's palace. Other than the fire cloud personal guards, there was no one else. Wang Xian was walking on the stairs between the mountains when he suddenly saw a beautiful figure standing in front of him. She was dressed in a fiery red phoenix robe and wore a phoenix crown on her head. She stood there and looked down at the land in front of her. "Eh? Feng Yuan, where are Shu Qing and the rest?" When Wang Xian saw Feng Yuan dressed up elegantly like a goddess, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at her and asked, "They are picking out clothes for Jian'er. They said that they will give you a surprise later." Feng Yuan turned around and looked at Wang Xian. A smile appeared on her face. After looking at him for more than 10 seconds, she turned around and said, "Thank you, Xiao Xian. Do we still need to thank you?" Wang Xian couldn't help but walk to Feng Yuan's side and stand beside her. "Of course we need to thank you. What else can we do? I don't have anything to repay you with. I can only say it verbally." Feng Yuan smiled. In the past, even though she had great ambitions, she never thought that she would unify the entire supernatural continent. However, the entire continent was under her feet now. Everything was because of this man beside her. When she was standing at the peak, she suddenly felt that the number one empress of all time was only SOSO. Cough, cough! Wang Xian sniffed the fragrance that came from beside him. His heart was slightly agitated. Among the group of girls, Feng Yuan's beauty could not be said to be number one. However, this noble and inviolable temperament was something that the other girls did not possess. When he thought of this, Wang Xian could not help but fantasize about other things. "Actually, it's not that I can't repay you." Wang Xian suddenly raised his eyebrows and placed his palm on Feng Yuan's shoulder subconsciously. "Huh!" Feng Yuan's body trembled and her face turned slightly red. She quickly turned her head to the side and did not dare to look at him. "Then how should I repay you?" She pretended not to care and asked. "That's easy." Wang Xian was also pretending to stand there. However, his palm subconsciously slid downwards. "Your hand!" Feng Yuan quickly felt that something was wrong. Her face quickly turned red as she gritted her teeth and said coldly, "What's wrong, Empress? Can't you repay me with your flesh? I'll go and talk to Shu Qing and the rest. Let's see if I can get another wife." Wang Xian suddenly sped up his speech and increased the strength in his palm. Following that, his figure disappeared in an instant. He ran away after touching her, and she was the Empress of the same world. This was really exciting. No one in the entire Transcendence continent dared to imagine this scene. The Dragon King was actually so wretched. Chapter 1812. 1812 The end of 1812 Supernatural Continent. "Xiao Xian, why are you smiling here? Your smile is so perverted." Wang Xian, who had teleported into the room, sniffed his hand. He looked perverted. At this moment, the puzzled voices of a few girls could be heard from the side. Wang Xian was slightly stunned. He immediately restrained his expression and looked at the few girls. However, when he turned around and looked over, he was instantly stunned. Noble, beautiful, and alluring. Fat Hoop, swallow thin. Everyone was wearing noble and beautiful long robes. Their temperament had improved by a few levels. Nothing much? Xiao Yu, go look for Feng Lingtian first. Your sisters-in-law and I have something important to attend to, Wang Xian said in all seriousness. Tui! However, Xiao Yu rolled her eyes at him and flew out. You! The group of girls naturally knew what he was going to do. They looked at him speechlessly. Hee hee! Wang Xian smiled and transformed into a werewolf and pounced on her. Outside, Feng Luan's expression kept changing. She took a deep breath and walked inside. When she reached the door, she stopped. Her face turned from red to green. The moonlight was beautiful. Today was a grand occasion for the entire Transcendence continent. At the foot of the peak of the Outian mountain, the lights were bright. It was destined to be a sleepless night. Everyone was looking forward to the unification ceremony of the continent tomorrow, and the major reform mentioned by the Empress. For Wang Xian, the spring breeze passed very quickly. On the second day, the entire main peak was bustling with activity. The army of the Dragon Phoenix Empire and countless citizens were gathered at the side. At the foot of the main peak, there was a huge square. In front of the square, there was a high platform erected. In the square, some powerful family forces stood in a row in front. Just the people from these family forces occupied the entire square. After all, they were the powerhouses of the entire continent. Outside the plaza, there were hundreds of millions of humans and demonic beasts gathered. The continent is unified. Our transcendent continent hasn't been unified for hundreds of thousands of years. I heard that our Empress is about to become a god. Perhaps only a god can manage the entire continent. I wonder what important announcement the Empress will make today. In the plaza, the families and experts from the various large factions were discussing in hushed voices. The unification of the continent might have a great impact on them. The fire cloud guards are coming out. The Empress might be coming. Everyone, quiet down! At this moment, the members of the fire cloud guards flew down from the main peak. The square and the surrounding areas were all silent. They looked up at the mountain peak and quietly waited for the Empress to appear. Roar! Roar! At noon, a low roar sounded from the main peak. The voice was filled with endless majesty. This is? Everyone trembled slightly. Their pupils constricted and they hurriedly raised their heads in shock. This is? Dragon King! On the main peak, a divine dragon with a body of 8,000 meters let out a low roar. He circled around the main peak and slowly flew down. On the dragon god's head, the Empress, who was dressed in a fiery red wind cannon, stood in the middle. She took a step back and 9 women stood at the back. Hua hua hua! When the dragon god was coming down, the swordsmen holding golden swords and the archers holding longbows were standing neatly in the sky. From their bodies, everyone could feel a strong pressure. Hiss, the Dragon King actually carried the Empress directly here. Is he supporting the women? The Dragon King is showing the entire continent that he is the one behind the Empress. Everyone was extremely shocked. The fact that the Empress could stand on the Dragon King's head showed their relationship. As for the group of girls behind, the entire continent also knew that they were the Dragon King's women and younger sister. Greetings to the Dragon King and the Empress. Everyone knelt on the ground and shouted loudly. Stand up! Feng Luan swept her gaze across everyone in front of her and waved her hand slightly. Thank you, Empress! Everyone stood up and looked at Wang Xian and Feng Luan with some respect. Wang Xian naturally didn't have any objections to the group of girls standing on top of him. Needless to say, Xiao Yu was his sister. The group of girls had even become dragon knights last night, so he had no objections. As for Feng Luan, she would be here soon. I've gathered all the aristocratic families and sects on the continent to come here today. I have 2 things to announce. First, the Dragon Phoenix Empire will unify all the continents except the ocean. The entire world will become the territory of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. All the subjects of the Dragon Phoenix Empire will be on the territory. Everyone and all the forces must obey the rules of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. Feng Wuan stood on the dragon's head, and her majestic voice resounded in everyone's mind. "We will obey the Empress's orders." Everyone was not surprised by the first thing Feng Wuan announced, and they immediately responded loudly. Second, the rules of the extraordinary continent in the future, which is also the laws of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. As Feng Wuan spoke, her sharp eyes swept across all the experts and powerful forces in front of her. The Dragon Man Empire has established a democratic system. Within the legal system, everyone is equal. All departments have been established. The new rules and order were announced, causing everyone's faces to reveal shock and astonishment. The higher-ups were under the supervision of the public and the supervision of other departments. Anyone who violated the legal system would be severely punished, even if they were longevity experts. Law enforcement departments, supervision departments, and administrative departments were all set up in the city. The city lord was no longer able to control the sky with one hand, and once he made a mistake, he would still be punished. Even if he killed people in the wild, he would still be punished. One detailed system after another completely overturned the birth of the previous rules, and this made everyone slightly open their mouths. This kind of rule might not be a good thing for many experts, but for the entire continent, it was a great improvement in civilization. Feng Wuan didn't care about the reactions of those experts and families. In front of her power, in front of the power of the Dragon Palace, these family forces could be destroyed with the snap of a finger. The birth of a new system meant that some people would benefit, and some people wouldn't benefit. However, in the future, it could raise the quality and strength of the extraordinary continent by a level. This reform was destined to leave a deep mark in the history of the extraordinary continent. Feng Wuan's name was also destined to be immortal. Just as Feng Wuan expected, when the new system that she announced was spread to every city on the extraordinary continent, it caused a huge sensation. Countless people cheered and jumped for joy. In an instant, the entire continent was singing the praises of the great Empress. In an instant, the great Empress's reputation even surpassed that of the Dragon King. When the new system was implemented, some people who resisted were killed with a snap of the fingers. When the new system was implemented, Wang Xian brought a group of girls and began to tour the entire supernatural continent. Their footsteps appeared in every corner of the supernatural continent. They also witnessed the new era of the supernatural continent, which was glorious and prosperous. Chapter 1813. 1813 and 1813 on Earth. In a blink of an eye, a year and a half had passed. In a year and a half, Wang Xian and the rest had traveled all over the transcendental continent. In this year and a half, the transcendental continent had undergone a huge change due to the laws and regulations of Feng Wuan. In the ocean, there were also huge changes. The Dragon Gate of the Dragon Palace stood on top of the Sea of Dragons. All the demonic beasts and ferocious beasts in the entire transcendental continent could jump through the Dragon Gate. As long as they could jump through the Dragon Gate, they could become disciples of the Dragon Palace. After the news was spread, all the beasts of the Transcendence continent rushed into the Transcendence Sea. Every day, countless beasts wanted to jump through the Dragon Gate and become disciples of the Dragon Palace. Some beasts jumped through the Dragon Gate and reached the sky in one step, but some beasts didn't. They were bitter and unwilling. After a long time, countless beasts gathered around the Dragon Sea. A world of demonic beasts was formed at the bottom of the sea, and with the Dragon Palace as the center, the seabed became lively. The Dragon Palace's strength increased every day after obtaining the resources of the extraordinary continent. Wow, a year has passed so quickly! Outside the Dragon Palace, a group of girls stretched out their arms and looked around with smiles on their faces. Yeah, I feel like we haven't had enough fun yet. When are we going out again? Xiao Yu held on to Feng Lingtian's arm as if she wanted more. Around them, a group of demonic beasts saw them and immediately prostrated themselves respectfully. We've been playing for a year and a half. It's enough. Let's go! Wang Xian shook his head. Women were crazy when they started playing. They hadn't stopped for a whole year and a half. If Feng Wuan hadn't informed them, they would have played for at least a few more months. I wonder what Sister Feng Luan has to do. She's been busy for a whole year and a half, but she hasn't finished, the girls said as they flew into the Dragon Palace. Sister Feng Luan! Sister Feng Luan, you've finished your work. When you're done, let's go out and play together. In the Dragon King Palace, a group of girls surrounded her and shouted at her with smiles on their faces. The new rules had just been released. Feng Luan needed to keep an eye on some things. It's settled. Feng Luan nodded with a smile. The main reason for coming this time is to find something. Let me show you. Xiao Xian, let's go to the peak of the Aotian mountain. As she spoke, she looked at Wang Xian. Huh! What did you find? Wang Xian revealed a curious expression. Some of the more magical things. Let's go over first. Prime Minister Gui is there too, Feng Luan said to Wang Xian. All right. Wang Xian nodded. It must be a big deal for Feng Luan to call them over directly. The group of them arrived above the Dragon Palace. In the past, there was a place in the Sea of Dragons where they could arrive at the Draconid Empire in an instant. In the past year or so, the Dragon Palace had broken through this kind of teleportation. Now, they could directly reach the peak of the Aotian mountain from the Dragon Palace. Buzz. The group arrived at the Array Formation and instantly arrived above the peak of the Aotian mountain. This way! Feng Luan flew in front and looked forward. Little Xian, when you were fighting the Dragon God once crashed into a peak of the Aotian mountain. When we were dealing with it, we found an array formation at the bottom of the mountain peak of Aotian. It was a cultivation array formation and a teleportation array formation. As she spoke, a hint of seriousness appeared on her face. Wang Xian raised his eyebrows and a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. From the broken mountain peak of Aotian to the interior, a space filled with divine power appeared in his line of sight. The entire space had a circumference of about 100 kilometers. Wang Xian was a little curious as to why Emperor Aoshan and the rest didn't discover this place. There were 11 futons in the entire space. Beneath each futon, there was an extremely powerful spiritual energy. In the middle of the 11 futons, there were 11 gigantic images. The images were flickering with light as they floated in the air. They looked extremely mysterious. Prime Minister Gui was standing at the bottom of the images. He was waving the turtle shell in his hand as he continued to calculate. This is? Wang Xian looked at the image, and his face was filled with surprise. Dragon King! Prime Minister Gui immediately bowed respectfully when he saw Wang Xian. What is this image? Wang Xian nodded his head and looked at the image in the sky curiously. Dragon King, if I'm not wrong, this should be the coordinates of the starry sky. We are currently on this planet. Prime Minister Gui had a contemplative look on his face as he spoke of the coordinates of the starry sky. The coordinates of the starry sky? Wang Xian was slightly taken aback as he stared intently at this picture. On the gigantic picture, the coordinates that represented the extraordinary continent were located in a remote corner. They were emitting a dim luster and could not be compared to the large coordinates at the center. This should be left behind by the ancient gods of the extraordinary continent. The gods of the extraordinary continent suddenly left hundreds of thousands of years ago. It should be the coordinates left behind by them. Feng Luan, who was at the side, guessed. The starry sky pattern and the starry sky coordinates? Wang Xian looked at the incomparably huge pattern. The Transcendence continent occupied less than 1/10,000 of it. He could not help but look pensive. Is there a teleportation formation here? Can the teleportation formation be used? No, it has been destroyed for a long time. Prime Minister Gui shook his head. The peak of the lofty heaven mountain is not only the center of the continent, but also the center of the spiritual energy of the continent. Cultivating on these 11 futons is several times more effective than cultivating in the Dragon Palace. If I can help with a large number of treasures, I can ignite the divine fire soon. Feng Luan glanced at the 11 futons, her eyes shining. But it requires 11 people to sit down and cultivate at the same time to affect the spiritual energy here. It's several times more powerful than the Dragon Palace. Is it that powerful? The group of girls looked surprised. Feng Luan nodded. However, this prayer mat can only be used for more than 10 years at most. After that, it will take some time before it can be used again. Do you want us to cultivate here? Wang Xian looked at Feng Luan. Yes. Feng Luan nodded. This is a huge opportunity for everyone. Even if it's you, little Xian, more than 10 years will allow you to advance by one level. I think there's no need for that. Shu Qing, you guys can cultivate here. Wang Xian shook his head and looked at the group of girls. That's great. However, we are prepared to bring Shu Qing Jianer to Earth to take a look. Guan Shu Qing, Lan Qingwei and the rest were slightly hesitant. They had been in the extraordinary mainland for more than 11 years. They still had family on Earth. It was time to return. I'll return to Earth in a while. Bring them over. Wang Xian looked at them and said. That's fine too. The group of girls nodded. Currently, the Transcendence continent was like a backyard garden to them. It was also fine to bring their family over to stay for a period of time. The path of cultivation for the rest of the journey was also very important to them. Good, then you can cultivate here. I will accompany you here for a period of time and return to Earth to take a look. Chapter 1814. 1814 In 1814, under the Earth. The sudden appearance of the galactic coordinate pattern and the appearance of the powerful cultivation futon disrupted the plans of Wang Xian and the group of girls. After hesitating for a while, the group of girls decided to cultivate here and let Wang Xian bring their loved ones over. Time passed slowly and half a year passed in the blink of an eye. In the past half a year, Wang Xian accompanied the group of girls every day and occasionally flirted with Feng Luan. Twice he was caught by the group of girls on the spot. However, they didn't say anything. This made Wang Xian more and more daring. Although he did not succeed in the end, he still enjoyed it. The speed of my cultivation here is indeed fast. As expected of the center of the entire continent. Wang Xian stood at the foot of the mountain peak of Aotian. Looking at the girls sitting cross-legged on the futons, he thought to himself. 11 futons, along with Xiao Yu and the 10 girls. The last position was where Feng Lingtian was cultivating. According to Feng Luan's guess, she would be able to ignite the divine fire within 2 years at most. As for the rest of the girls, with the support of powerful resources, they should be able to ignite the divine fire and condense the divine spark within 5 years. Wang Xian watched them cultivate in seclusion. After instructing Prime Minister Gui, he flew outside and looked at the flourishing world. Then, he arrived at the Dragon Palace in a flash. It's been 12 years. After returning to the Dragon Palace, Wang Xian thought to himself and opened the system notification record. Among the numerous system notifications, there was one that was very eye-catching. Ding! Earth's first-class Dragon Palace has been destroyed. All the members of the Dragon Palace have died. This was a message sent by the system when Wang Xian perished, and fused with the heart of light and darkness. It had been several years since the information was sent. At that time, he was injured and had no time to deal with it when the vast region attacked the flowing sea region after his resurrection. Later on, Wang Xian did not bother about this piece of information. Compared to the supernatural continent, Earth was much weaker. Furthermore, there were too few resources on Earth. Hence, he did not pay too much attention to the destruction of the Dragon Palace. The Dragon Palace on Earth was a level 1 Dragon Palace. It was extremely weak to begin with, and there were only a dozen members of the Dragon Palace. However, even if it's a level 1 Dragon Palace, the members of the Dragon Palace are extremely weak. However, an ordinary person would definitely not dare to destroy my Dragon Palace. Did something big happen on Earth? Or? Wang Xian looked at the system notification and was curious. Let's go back and take a look. I want to know who dares to destroy my Dragon Palace. Wang Xian smiled. He was not bothered by the changes on Earth. With his strength, he was an invincible existence on Earth. When he left, the highest level on Earth had not even reached transcendence. It had only been more than 10 years. No matter how strong he could not be that strong. Ao Jian, Ao Qi Tian! Wang Xian shouted softly. Your subordinate is here! Soon, 2 figures flew over quickly and knelt in front of him. Ao Jian, who held a sharp sword in his hand, and Ao Qi Tian, who held the ocean-pacifying divine needle in his hand. Ao Jian looked like a middle-aged swordsman. There was no emotion on his face as he coldly half-knelt on the ground. Ao Qi Tian had an incomparably tall and sturdy figure. He was about 2 meters tall and had a pair of 3 pairs of Goyu eyes. Ao Jian and Ao Qi Tian had already reached half-step level 9. Ao Jian's strength could be considered invincible under the divine realm. Ao Qi Tian, who had advanced to the wild dragon seed, could barely fight against a god who had ignited 2 wisps of godly fire. A true god who could kill a wisp of godly fire. Follow me to Earth! Wang Xian looked at the 2 of them and said indifferently. It's the Dragon King! The 2 of them nodded immediately. Let's go! The matters of the Dragon Palace had been handed over to Prime Minister Gui. The girls would be cultivating in seclusion for at least 1 to 2 years. Returning to Earth to visit his old friends, Wang Xian waved his arm and led Ao Jian and Ao Qi Tian to the flowing sea region. That was the entrance to Earth. With his rapid teleportation, Wang Xian still took a day to arrive at the flowing sea region from the center of the continent with the power that could kill 3 wisps of divine fire true gods. Arriving at the sea region that he was extremely familiar with, he smiled faintly. He still remembered that when he first entered this place, he had to flee when he encountered some powerful supernatural beasts. Now, with his arrival, all the creatures in the entire aquatic race were worshipping him. It should be here! According to his memory, Wang Xian arrived at the surroundings of the entrance of Earth. The entrance of the cave had already been covered by seaweed. Buzz! With a wave of his arm, the familiar black hole appeared in front of him. He moved his body and stepped into it directly. Ha! However, before he came out, he realized that there was soil above him. The soil was at least 1,000 meters thick, which made him very surprised. With a move of his body, he broke out of the soil and appeared above him. An unfamiliar aura rushed over, causing Wang Xian to be stunned. He looked around and saw that there was still seawater around him. It was clear blue seawater. However, the depth of the water here had already reached about 15,000 meters. He clearly remembered that this place was only a few thousand meters back then. How did it suddenly become more than 10,000 meters now? Other than the change in the depth of the ocean, Wang Xian had a special feeling that the earth seemed to have become bigger. Faintly, he could feel a powerful force coming from all directions. The level of this force was not weaker than the Dragon God. In fact, it was even stronger than the Dragon God. What kind of huge change has happened on Earth? Wang Xian was slightly surprised. The god had actually appeared on Earth. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a flash, he appeared in the sky. Beside him, Ao Qi Tian and Ao Jian accompanied him and flew tens of thousands of meters into the sky. The dragon eyes of the yin-yang and 5 elements were opened. Wang Xian's majestic dragon eyes swept across the entire planet. The Earth has changed. It is expanding at a slow speed. It must be due to the recovery of the spiritual energy. Furthermore, the Earth is actually moving. In other words, the Earth is roaming around. He looked up at the starry sky. A huge amount of spiritual energy filled an area of tens of millions of kilometers. The entire planet was under a certain force as it flew towards the unknown starfield. In the east, a huge palace that was tens of thousands of kilometers long was standing in the void. That was the kingdom of God. In the west, a sacred mountain palace that was emitting a powerful light force was also standing in the void. That was the kingdom of God. At the center of the equator, there was an extremely huge flaming palace that was over 1,000 kilometers long. Flames were shooting up into the sky. That was the kingdom of God. At the bottom of the sea that was over 1,000 kilometers away, there was a palace that was over 1,000 kilometers long. The vast underwater palace was standing there. It was the kingdom of God. As for other places, Wang Xian couldn't see them. The gods are here. The world has changed. Wang Xian sensed the scenes on earth, and sighed in his heart. The earth was wandering in the starry sky. The gods had descended to earth. A mythical era had begun. Fortunately, the original citizens of Earth didn't suffer a catastrophe. Instead, they had the opportunity to become stronger. God has come, I have come back. Chapter 1815. 1815. The 1815 Dragon King was here. The god is here, and so am I. Wang Xian hovered in the void and muttered. He looked down at the entire earth with a nostalgic expression on his face. This was his root and the place where he rose up. Even if the earth was not as vast as the supernatural continent, he would still live on earth in the future. Although the earth was unfamiliar, it was still the same earth. He slowly closed his eyes and spread his divine sense across the entire earth. Vast and mighty power silently spread towards earth. 9 familiar blood vessels were pulsating. Wang Xian remembered that they were the 9 dragon veins. Back then, when he injected the blood of the divine dragon into the dragon veins, the 9 dragon veins had already given birth to a will. Faint and familiar light spots appeared in his mind. Those were the blood vessels that he left behind, the dragon men. They were the former disciples of the Dragon Gate. Father, I've broken through to the 5th level of body refining today. The headmaster said that I'm a genius, Father. In the east, a little boy held a long sword in his hand and shouted excitedly at a middle-aged man. Kid, why don't you take a look at whose bloodline you have? Why don't you take a look at what bloodline I have? That's... A middle-aged man smiled and patted the little boy's head. At this moment, his body suddenly froze, and his eyes revealed a look of excitement and madness. Plop! Under the little boy's astonished gaze, the majestic and invincible father in his heart directly knelt on the ground. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked to the west, and his body trembled violently. Dragon King, are you back? As he spoke, tears flowed down his face, and his face was filled with extreme excitement. The leader didn't let 156 and the others take revenge. These guys insisted on going. If something happened to them, the leader would definitely be furious. This god who descended is too powerful. The sea god destroyed the dragon palace. We are not their match at all. We also don't know where the Dragon King is now. We want revenge too, but in front of the sea god, we are no different from ants. Oh right, 23's wife gave birth to a girl. Beside a small mountain, in a rural area, a few men sat beside a fish pond, talking in low voices. They were once the famous Dragon Gate on Earth. After the Dragon King disappeared and the Dragon Palace was destroyed, the leader of the Dragon Gate, Mo Qinglong, disbanded the Dragon Gate in order to prevent anyone from taking revenge on the Dragon Gate. Now, the disciples of the Dragon Gate gathered once a year, and some of the members had already gotten married and had children. While they were talking, their bodies froze slightly. They looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with excitement. Pooh pooh pooh! Everyone immediately knelt on the ground, and their bodies trembled violently. Their king had returned. Not only here, in the luxurious villa, in the ordinary rooms, and in the ocean, there were 50 disciples of the Dragon Gate. In addition to those who had fallen, there were now more than 40 disciples. When they sensed the throbbing of their blood vessels, their faces revealed excitement and disbelief. Oh? The Dragon King has returned? But now, it may not be the world of the Dragon Palace and the Dragon Gate anymore. In a luxurious villa, a few elders of the Lan family saw Mo Qinglong kneeling on the ground in excitement. While their eyes were burning with passion, they heaved a sigh. The world had changed. Phew! All the images were transmitted to Wang Xian's mind, causing him to heave a sigh of relief. There was a sigh and a smile on his face. I didn't expect that after more than 10 years, some of the dragon men have children. Wang Xian revealed a happy smile on his face. He was no longer a teenager when he returned this time. All the Dragon Gate disciples already had children. When Wan Xian was preparing to enter the extraordinary mainland, he had basically dismissed the Dragon Gate and allowed them to develop freely. At the same time, he took care of Guan Shuqing and Lan Qingyue's family. Looking at the scenes in his mind, he sighed slightly. This is good too. Wan Xian smiled faintly and looked at the ocean ahead. There were 2 disciples of the Dragon Gate there. According to some vague information, they wanted to take revenge for the Dragon Palace. Revenge? Looks like the Dragon Palace was destroyed by them. Wan Xian looked at the kingdom of God below and revealed a faint sneer. Let's go and see what kind of force is it that dares to destroy our Dragon Palace. Wan Xian said to Ao Jian and Ao Qitian, who was beside him. Then, he disappeared instantly. The Divine Sea Palace. It was one of the 5 major forces of the Dragon Palace. The Divine Sea Palace, the Soaring Heavens Treasured Palace, the Holy Church, the Fire God Palace, and the Pharaoh Palace were the 5 major forces that occupied Earth. Each of them was extremely powerful and had the legendary god overseeing them. Once the Divine Sea Palace descended, it took over the Earth's 5 lakes and 4 seas. With a casual blow from the sea god, the Dragon Palace vanished into thin air. Everyone saw how powerful the Divine Sea Palace was. After the 5 great factions and the 5 great gods descended on Earth, they immediately recruited disciples and spread the cultivation techniques. The entire Earth began to develop rapidly. In addition, the spiritual energy had recovered, and the Earth had become larger. Some mountains and some places had shown signs of miracles, and everyone on Earth's strength had increased drastically. As the 5 strongest forces on Earth, everyone was proud to join them. Countless people worked hard to cultivate in order to have the chance to become gods. Every time the Divine Sea Palace recruited disciples, it would drive everyone crazy. However, not everyone had the right to do so. The 5 major forces had established academies all over the world. Only the disciples with great talent had the chance to join them. The 5 major forces did not only bring the Sea God, Emperor Ling Xiao, the Fire God, the Holy Light God, and the Dharma God. They also brought billions of their subordinates. The Lingxiao Treasure Palace had the most people. The Lingxiao Treasure Palace alone had 100,000 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, and the rest of the disciples numbered in the tens of millions. The Spirit Sea Palace also had millions of disciples. Wan Xian came to the front of the Spirit Sea Palace and looked at the Divine Kingdom without any expression on his face. Thousands of young men and women were gathered in the surrounding area. All of them looked excited. Everyone looked up at the Divine Kingdom in front of them. Wan Xian appeared at the back and didn't attract anyone's attention. I wonder if I can join the Divine Sea Palace this time. The last time the Divine Sea Palace recruited disciples, there were 5,000 of them. Only 100 of them went in. I was eliminated last time. This time, there are quite a number of talented disciples who should be able to enter the Spirit Sea Palace. I'm sure Seaman Hai will be able to join. His current strength is too strong. He must have mastered a few abhijanas by now. At this moment, voices of discussion could be heard from the front. Wan Xian stood there and swept his gaze across all the young men around him. His eyes were sparkling. All the young men here had reached the Transcendence Realm. Furthermore, they were all at the 5th or 6th level of the Transcendence Realm. This shocked him slightly. The speed at which the people on Earth were improving was too fast. Chapter 1816. 1816 In 1816, the world did not recognize the monarch. The Transcendence Realm could be considered a deity on Earth more than 10 years ago. However, the group of young people had already reached the Transcendence Realm. This made Wang Xian very surprised. According to the normal cultivation speed, it was very difficult to reach the Transcendence Realm even with the current heaven and earth's spiritual energy. It seems that the recovery of spiritual energy is not only an opportunity for humans, but also for Earth. Wang Xian thought about the expansion of Earth and the arrival of extraterrestrial gods. He had some guesses in his heart. The legend of the divine dragon and the legends of the gods on earth might not have been fabricated. During the ancient times, there might have been powerful gods and religions on earth. Perhaps for some reason, the earth had declined, and those heaven-defying religions had left. The recovery of spiritual energy might have attracted the attention of those true gods of religions. They would descend on earth and bring the earth to their region. The reason why the humans on earth could rise so quickly was probably because of the recovery of earth. Some spiritual objects had also recovered. Everyone, take out your identity cards and enter the Spirit Sea Palace one by one. At this moment, a voice came from the front. Everyone immediately walked towards the majestic Spirit Sea Palace. They looked at the middle-aged man with a human body and a fish tail who was holding a trident in his hand with reverence. They looked at the yearning expression on the face of the Spirit Sea Palace, and walked in respectfully. Wang Xian watched the people in front enter, and followed closely behind. Stop! Take out your identity cards! Just as Wang Xian walked to the entrance, a cold voice was heard. I'm here to look for someone. Wang Xian looked at the guard beside him indifferently. He had a fish tail and a human body. He had fish gills and a sharp mouth. Clearly, he was not a creature from Earth. Please come in. When the mermaid guard saw Wang Xian's gaze, his body trembled slightly and he said respectfully. The group of young men and women in front did not notice this scene. Wang Xian continued to walk in with Ao Jian and Ao Qitian. When he entered, Wang Xian immediately sensed the powerful spiritual energy from the divine kingdom. The water energy contained in it was comparable to the spiritual energy in an ordinary place in the Dragon Palace. There were mermaids roaming around the surroundings. There were all kinds of aquatic creatures. Even the gigantic blue whale had two in front of it. Other than the mermaids, there were also quite a number of normal humans. The entire Divine Sea Palace was extremely dreamy and beautiful. Oh my God, this place is simply too beautiful. It would be great if I could cultivate here. There's the Li Shao treasured palace above and the Sea God Palace below. Only a god can build such a holy place. In the front, a group of young men and women looked around in shock and sighed. The test field is in front. If you pass the test, you can become a disciple of the Sea God Palace. Work hard. At the front, a middle-aged man said proudly to them. Yes, sir. The group of young men and women immediately nodded in response. After walking for more than 10 minutes, a huge training field appeared in everyone's sight. At this moment, there were 7,000 to 8,000 disciples cultivating in the training field. At the front, there were more than 10 middle-aged young men standing in a row. Their eyes were filled with dignity as they swept their gaze over. Wang Xian's gaze swept across the dozen of middle-aged young men and realized that all of them were at the profound void tier. Although they were not very strong among the profound void tier, their strength was invincible on earth in the past. When the thousands of disciples who were cultivating around them saw their arrival, they also looked over curiously with a proud look on their faces. These dozen of them are your instructors for the assessment. They said that only those who are qualified to join the Spirit Sea Palace are qualified to join. The middle-aged man saw the 10-odd young men standing in a row, cupped his hands, and shouted at all the young men and women behind him. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts, and they looked at the 10-odd young men in awe. Kneel and worship! At that moment, a young man among the 10-odd people raised his head slightly and took a step forward. With his hands behind his back, he swept his gaze across all the people in front of him and shouted arrogantly. Greetings, teacher! Everyone did not dare to hesitate in the slightest. They directly knelt on one knee on the ground and shouted loudly. Yes! Yes? The young teacher nodded his head in satisfaction. However, he quickly raised his eyebrows slightly and his gaze landed on the 3 people at the back. One of the 2 people was like a demonic beast. They stood there and looked at their surroundings indifferently as though they did not hear his words. The other 10 or so middle-aged youths also looked over and raised their eyebrows slightly. What's going on? The group of young men and women who were kneeling on the ground were also slightly shocked. Some of them turned their heads slightly to look behind them. Hurry up and kneel. If you anger the teachers, you won't even know how you died. A young man growled at them in a low voice. Who are the three of you? What are you doing in our sea god palace? The young mentor took a few steps forward again and questioned Wang Xian and the rest with a cold gaze. I'm here to look for someone. 8 years ago, someone destroyed my underwater palace and killed my disciples. I'm here to seek an explanation. Wang Xian looked at the young mentor and said, I'm here to take a look and see how this matter should be handled. As he spoke with a calm expression, he looked in the direction of the group of disciples who were cultivating. There were 2 familiar bloodlines there. If his guess was correct, they were MO15 and MO16, the 2 disciples of the Dragon Gate. What? Wang Xian's words stunned the young mentor slightly. His face was filled with astonishment and doubt. Everyone around was also slightly stunned. What was this fellow doing here? What underwater palace? Kid, how did you sneak in? How dare you barge into our divine sea palace? I think you are courting death. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. Those who barge into our divine sea palace without permission shall die. The young mentor narrowed his eyes slightly. With a move of his palm, waves of water condensed into long spears. Junior brother, it's meaningless to kill them directly. Since they dare to sneak into our sea god palace, they must have some strength. Mortals who have come to participate in the assessment, your first assessment mission begins now. Kill the 3 of them. The 3 people who have killed them will join our sea god palace directly. The rest will continue the assessment. Just as the young man made his move, a middle-aged man in the center waved his hand indifferently and said to all the young men who were participating in the assessment, Then we'll listen to senior brother. The young mentor smiled and nodded immediately. He glanced at all the young men and women who were kneeling in front of him indifferently. If we kill them, we can join the Spirit Sea Palace directly? The eyes of all the young men and women who were kneeling on the ground reflected light as a hint of excitement flashed across their eyes. Their dog lives are mine! An elegant young man dressed in sky-blue attire, and holding a blue longsword stood up immediately, and turned around with a face full of confidence. Walala! The rest of the young men and women also stood up immediately. Their eyes were sparkling as they stared at Wang Xian and the other 2. It has been more than 12 years since we parted. The world no longer recognizes you. Chapter 1817. 1817 and 1817, the world did not recognize him. After more than 12 years of separation, the world no longer recognized him. Wang Xian looked at the group of middle-aged men from the Divine Sea Palace in front of him with a mocking expression. Looking at the group of young men who took out their weapons and were about to make a move, he shook his head slightly. Once upon a time, in the entire earth, who dared to say that they wanted to kill him? Who dared to look at him with such disrespect? There was a time when everyone in the world stood in front of him. Which one of them didn't bow and kowtow respectfully? But this is what makes it interesting. Wang Xian looked at everyone in front of him. His eyes were shining. He was worrying about how he should develop in the future. Now was the perfect time. Let's have a battle with the gods and the expert from the starry sky. Ants! Ao Jian saw that the people in front of him were actually about to attack them. A gleam of sword radiance flashed across his indifferent eyes. What happened? Are there ants that dare to cause trouble in our Divine Sea Palace? It seems like someone has sneaked in. Furthermore, they are a little arrogant. They are looking for death. What happened here attracted the attention of the people in the surroundings. Some of them looked over curiously. Their faces were filled with mockery. The 5 major factions on Earth were the difference between mortals and gods to everyone. To dare to cause trouble here was simply courting death. This was the first time they saw someone dare to sneak into the Spirit Sea Palace. However, at this very moment, at the front of the training ground, 2 middle-aged men looked over. When they saw Wang Xian, their bodies stiffened slightly. This. The 2 of them looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Their eyes were fixed on Wang Xian's figure. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Not long ago, the two of them had already sensed the arrival of the Dragon King. Furthermore, the two of them had sneaked into the Spirit Sea Palace to seek revenge for the Dragon Palace. The moment they sensed the Dragon King again, they were already prepared to leave this place to look for the Dragon King. In the end, they did not expect the Dragon King to actually come. He came to the Divine Sea Palace, which possessed invincible strength. Oh no! Seeing that the Dragon King was surrounded by a group of young men, the two of them looked at each other with a crazy killing intent on their faces. Haha, I'll take their lives first! In front of Wang Xian, the eyes of 5,000 young men slowly revealed killing intent. One of the burly young men held a large saber in his hand and attacked Wang Xian directly. Kill! The rest of the young men rushed over with excitement in their eyes. Killing intent filled the air. When Aojian saw this scene, he slowly raised his palm. He did not even pull out the sword in his hand. Die! Die! However, just as Aojian was about to make his move, two voices filled with killing intent were heard. Following that, two figures revealed a violent aura on their faces. They were charging towards the 5,000 young men with killing intent. What? The powerful aura that was suddenly transmitted caused the 5,000 young men to be slightly startled. Ah! However, a miserable cry was quickly emitted. 156! The sudden attack of the two figures caused the over 10 middle-aged young instructors to be slightly startled. Their expressions changed slightly. 156! What are you all doing? Stop! A middle-aged man took a step forward and shouted at them. A bunch of people who are looking for death. Get lost! However, 156 didn't pay attention to him. The power of a level 9 transcendent charged to the front. Dozens of young men and women died under their hands. The disciples of the Divine Sea Palace suddenly attacked and killed them. This made the young men and women who came to take the test look frightened. Sirs, you! They retreated backward in horror. They looked at the two middle-aged men who had suddenly charged over in shock. Dragon King, please leave! The faces of the 156 men changed as they rushed to the side of Wang Xian and the rest. They roared in a low voice. There was excitement, worry, and fear on their faces. The two brothers had joined the Divine Sea Palace behind their leader's back because they wanted to avenge the Dragon Palace in the future. However, only after they joined did they realize how terrifying the Divine Sea Palace was. They were gods. The Dragon Gate and even the Dragon Palace could not fight against them in the past. Clap! Clap! Wan Xian looked at the loyal Draconids and patted their shoulders gently. Although a large part of their loyalty was due to their bloodlines, he was still very impressed that MO15 and MO16 could achieve such a feat. Dragon King? When the people of the Divine Sea Palace saw the abnormal behavior of the two people, they were full of surprise when they suddenly came to the three people and said something. Dragon King? Who was it? Why did 156 do such a thing? The two of them were outstanding existences in the same level of the Divine Sea Palace, and they were highly valued by many people. And now, because of these three strangers, they killed a group of disciples who came to take the test and addressed each other respectfully as Dragon King? 156, who are they? Who are you people? The young mentor glanced at the corpses on the ground and stared at the two of them with a cold expression. Dragon King, the strength of the Spirit Sea Palace is not something we can contend with. Leave quickly, we will help you stop them. Devil 15 and Devil 16 still ignored the young man and spoke to Wang Xian anxiously once again. Both of you should live a good life. Wang Xian looked at the two of them and said calmly. 156, I think both of you are courting death. When the young mentor of the Spirit Sea Palace saw that the two of them still ignored him, his eyes were filled with killing intent. He moved his body and stretched out his claw. An incomparably huge claw materialized and clawed at them. Stand aside! Wang Xian ordered when he saw Devil number 15 and Devil number 16, whose expressions had changed drastically. He looked at the young man and slowly swept his gaze across everyone around him. Clang! As his gaze swept past them, the sound of a sharp sword could be heard from the side. The sword was not unsheathed, and Aojian merely raised his arm gently. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. The bodies of the 5,000 young men and women in front of them, as well as the young mentor who was attacking them, froze instantly. Bang, 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 bang! Without a sound or a scream, bodies fell to the ground one after another. With a wave of his hand, all 5,000 to 6,000 people died. Aojian was cold-blooded. He cultivated the path of ruthlessness without any feelings. He only knew that anyone who offended a dragon king would die, even if they were innocent. The dragon guards had no feelings, only ruthlessness, and only the dragon king. Hiss. The sudden death of thousands of people caused everyone in the surrounding Divine Sea Palace to suck in a breath of cold air. The pupils of the more than 10 teachers standing at the front shrunk slightly as they looked at Aojian in shock. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wang Xian. 12 years ago, I was called the Dragon King here. Once, the underwater dragon palace that you destroyed was my palace. Wang Xian saw their shocked look and introduced himself to them indifferently. Chapter 1818. 1818. The 1818 world did not recognize him. Dragon King? Wang Xian's voice reverberated in the surroundings. Everyone could hear him clearly. His voice was filled with calmness and calmness. However, under the contrast of the thousands of corpses around them, one could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. His words made the young men of the Divine Sea Palace look puzzled. Dragon King? Dragon King, you are the Dragon King? You are the Dragon King of the Dragon Palace. All of a sudden, an exclamation came from the back. A middle-aged man stared at Wang Xian with his eyes wide open. His eyes were filled with shock. Although it had been more than 10 years and the world no longer recognized him, the word Dragon King still represented an era. An era that was shrouded by the Dragon King. Some of the middle-aged men still knew the era of the recovery of spiritual energy, the name of the Dragon King, and the power of the Dragon King. The Dragon King? The Dragon King from more than 10 years ago. The invincible Dragon King from more than 10 years ago on Earth? The middle-aged man's exclamation seemed to stir up some memories, and more people showed surprised expressions. Woo woo woo! When some people recalled, a rapid sound of a conch resounded throughout the entire Spirit Sea Palace. For the first time, the rapid sound of a conch came from the Sea God Palace, and it was also the first time that someone dared to cause trouble in the Dragon Palace. And the troublemaker was that Dragon King. Dragon King? What Dragon King? Is it that Lord Sea God who came to destroy the trashy Dragon Palace with a casual blow? At this moment, the middle-aged man among the dozen or so instructors looked at the group of people who had been killed in an instant with an embarrassed expression and roared in a low voice. A Dragon King who is as small as an ant dares to kill people in our Divine Sea Palace. As he spoke, he scanned his surroundings and saw the Sea God Palace disciples flying over. He felt confident. That terrifying attack just now had terrified him. The middle-aged swordsman who had attacked just now was much stronger than him. Buzz, buzz, buzz! As soon as he finished speaking, more than 10,000 figures quickly swam over. There were mermaids with tridents and humans with horns on their heads. Each of them was emitting a terrifying aura as they flew over. The hurried sound of conch shells from the Spirit Sea Palace indicated that there was an enemy invasion. Ever since they descended to Earth, no one had dared to invade the Spirit Sea Palace. What happened? At this moment, a young voice sounded. A young man and a woman were standing in front of two blue-armored, ferocious-looking aquatic creatures. They were swimming toward them. Behind the young man and the woman were more than a dozen middle-aged men in full armor and holding long spears. Their sharp eyes swept over, full of dignity. Your Highness, the Divine Sun! Your Highness, the Goddess! More than a dozen instructors and a group of disciples of the Divine Sea Palace who were cultivating hurriedly knelt down and shouted at the young man and the lady. The young man was dressed in sky-blue soft armor and had a towering head. He looked extremely handsome. The lady was dressed in the same sky-blue color. On top of her clothes were gemstones that were emitting powerful energy. She was extremely beautiful. The children of the sea god palace. Who dares to kill people in our divine sea palace? The crown prince's gaze swept across the corpses on the ground. A cold glint shot out from his eyes as his gaze landed on Wang Xian and the rest in the middle. Son of deity, he calls himself the Dragon King. He should be the master of the dragon palace that the sea god casually destroyed when our divine sea palace descended. He came and killed all of our assessment members and one of our disciples. The middle-aged mentor immediately reported respectfully to the crown prince of the divine sea palace. The arrival of the experts from the divine sea palace made him slightly relieved. Dragon King? The Dragon King who ruled this world before we descended? According to our estimations, his strength at that time was at most at the extraordinary realm. Why is he here to take revenge now? The goddess beside him looked at Wang Xian curiously and asked in puzzlement. It's Her Highness, the goddess. It's that Dragon King. He was the overlord of our Earth more than 10 years ago, the master of the Dragon Palace. A middle-aged man who knew the situation immediately reported to the princess. He looked at Wang Xian with a complicated expression. He was once the overlord of Earth. Unfortunately, the Earth had changed. Now, it was the world of the gods. It was the world of the 5 major forces. Goddess, this is indeed the former Dragon King of Earth. I've seen him before. There are no changes compared to more than 10 years ago. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, an old man dressed in luxurious clothes came close to the group of people who followed the crown prince and princess. He reported to them in a low voice. What dragon palace? What dragon king? He is just an ant in front of our divine sea palace. He dares to kill people in our divine sea palace. Capture him and send him into the ice region. Let him enjoy the bitter cold of the ice region. The son of deity looked at Wang Xian and didn't put him in his eyes at all. He waved his hand and ordered. It's the son of deity. A merman with a trident in his hand bowed and responded. He gestured to his subordinates beside him. Sir guard, be careful. That middle-aged swordsman is very strong. The middle-aged man who had just started reminded him immediately. Even if the other forces of the divine kingdom come to our divine sea palace to cause trouble, they can forget about leaving. The leader of the patrol guards who was holding the trident smiled confidently. This was the divine kingdom of Lord Sea God. It was their territory. Buzz. Kneel down and bow your heads, or we will chop off your limbs. More than a dozen patrol guards swam over and shouted at Wang Xian and the rest coldly. I didn't expect the Dragon King to be alive. However, he is too irrational. He actually dared to barge into the Sea God Palace. Times have changed. The ice region is a place where the sinners of the Sea God Palace are imprisoned. Once they are imprisoned, their lives would be worse than death. Whispers could be heard. Most of the people in the training grounds were natives of Earth. Seeing the sudden appearance of the Dragon King, they were both shocked and slightly sighed. This time, the Dragon King might have been completely defeated. However, the Dragon King was already an outdated person on Earth. Compared to the current generation of divine sons and goddesses, he was nothing compared to the proud sons of heaven who wanted to ascend to the divine throne. Even if the outside world knew that the Dragon King had returned and was killed by the divine sea palace, they would not be too shocked. Where is your sea god? 8 years ago, he destroyed the Dragon Palace and killed the disciples of my Dragon Palace. Ask him to give me an explanation. Wang Xian glanced at the tens of thousands of disciples of the Divine Sea Palace around him indifferently. He landed on the Divine Sun and Goddess and spoke calmly. Our sea god is not something that an ant like you can see. When the dozen or so guards heard Wang Xian's words, a cold glint appeared in their eyes. The trident in their hands attacked the limbs of Wang Xian and the rest. Then I shall wait. Wang Xian shook his head slowly. Heartless sword desolation, rampage in all directions. Ao Jian's cold voice rang out. He unsheathed the sharp sword in his hand. Countless sword rays instantly attacked the surroundings. The attack of a half-step godly state was unleashed. Buzz! 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 When the countless golden sword rays were unsheathed, the entire Divine Sea Palace trembled. Not good, he's very strong! The expressions of the divine sons and goddesses, as well as the dozen or so experts behind them, changed drastically. Chapter 1819. 1819. The 1819 God's death and the world's wailing shocked the world. Demigod strength, and it's at the peak of the demigod realm. When Aojian's heartless sword was unsheathed and the sword rays attacked the surroundings, everyone's expressions changed. Especially the divine sons and divine daughters. As the children of the sea god, their own strength had already reached the longevity realm, which was the demigod realm. When they felt Aojian's attack, their expressions changed drastically. Be careful, sons and daughters! Behind them, more than a dozen other demigod experts instantly arrived in front of them. Each of them had a mysterious water shield in front of them to block the attack. They looked at the horrifying sword light with shock in their eyes. Be careful! Be careful! His strength is so terrifying! The expressions of the surrounding disciples of the Divine Sea Palace changed drastically. More than a dozen guards who were in the lead showed despair in their eyes. They could feel the destructive attacks from the sharp swords. Pooh! 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 The piercing sounds rang out as the sharp sword rays pierced through the tens of thousands of experts from the surrounding Divine Sea Palace. Pun! 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 Not good, the attack power is too strong! In front of the divine sons and goddesses, the expressions of the dozen or so demigod experts changed drastically when they saw the sharp swords landing on their water shields. Their defenses were like a layer of paper in front of the sharp swords. They were not on the same level at all. No! The 5 or 6 demigods of the Divine Sea Palace who were standing at the very front let out terrified roars when they saw the sharp swords coming toward them. Pooh! 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 Sea God Sky scream! The divine sons standing at the back widened their eyes. Their eyes were filled with shock. He placed his hands on his chest, and a blue screen of light completely surrounded them. Bang! 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 The sharp sword landed on it, making a dull, loud sound. The goddess' face instantly turned extremely pale. She looked at the tens of thousands of corpses in front of her and around her in a daze. How is this possible? The divine son's expression changed as he stared at Aojian and growled in a low voice. This? Around them, the people in the cultivation field who had not been attacked revealed expressions of shock. They watched this scene in disbelief, staring blankly at the guards of the Divine Sea Palace. There were more than 10,000 guards, more than 10,000 experts, and every guard had reached the insightful void realm. But now, they were all killed in one move by the swordsman beside the Dragon King. There were more than 10,000 insightful void realm experts, and each of them was an existence they had to look up to. Even the demigod who had followed the divine son and goddess was killed directly. This was a demigod. An invincible demigod who could turn the clouds and rain upside down. Father, save me! Immediately after, the divine son's terrified voice resounded throughout the entire Divine Sea Palace, causing the expressions of all living beings in the palace to change drastically. The Son of Deity was actually calling for help here. All the experts of the Divine Sea Palace immediately flew over. The swordsman beside the Dragon King is so powerful. How can he be so powerful? How is this possible? He killed more than 10,000 experts of the Divine Sea Palace in one move. Just how powerful are the Dragon King and the others? Oh my God, has the former Dragon King returned? Shocked voices came from the training ground. Those middle-aged men who had gone through the era of the Dragon King were shocked. Those young men who had not gone through the era of the Dragon King were also dumbfounded. The legendary Dragon King was so terrifying now? At this moment, in the deepest part of the Divine Sea Palace, there was a depression there. The whole depression was emitting a mysterious light. A burly middle-aged man was sitting in the center with his legs crossed. When he heard the voice coming from the Divine Sea Palace, he slowly opened his eyes. The entire scene in the Divine Sea Palace appeared in his mind. As the Divine Sea Palace, he was the ruler here. When the scene in the outer cultivation field appeared in his mind, a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. 1. At this moment, the entire Divine Sea Palace let out a soundless roar. A terrifying pressure appeared in the sky above the cultivation field. The vast and mighty power seemed to have taken over the entire world. Out of thin air, a burly middle-aged man appeared in front of the divine sons and goddesses. Bang! A burly middle-aged man with sky-blue pupils stood in the sky. The burly middle-aged man was 2 meters tall. On the empty ground beside him, a 3-meter-wide trident that was emitting divine light appeared out of thin air. The burly middle-aged man held the trident and looked down at Wang Xian and the rest from above. Father! Father! See God! When the divine sons and goddesses saw their father appear, they were pleasantly surprised. Around them, the disciples of the Divine Sea Palace immediately knelt on the ground and bowed to the sea god. Which faction is it? The burly sea god stared at Wang Xian and the rest. The blue light had locked onto them completely. Sensing his strength, his eyes were filled with coldness. The entire sea god palace was emitting an extremely oppressive aura. Boom! Crash! Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew in the surrounding sea area of the sea god palace. The waves rose to a height of over 1,000 meters. The waves within a radius of a few thousand kilometers howled violently even though there was no wind. What's going on? What happened in the ocean? What a huge wave! Oh no, evacuate immediately! What's going on? Is the sea god angry? In the coastal area, as well as some ships on the ocean, when they saw the huge wave that was suddenly raised, they were all shocked. Only the sea god's anger could raise such a terrifying wave. Many experts also looked toward the ocean in astonishment, their hearts filled with astonishment. The entire ocean was surging. In the Divine Sea Palace, everyone could feel the mighty power of the sea god. Dragon Palace, Dragon King! Wang Xian saw the sea god appearing in front of him and replied indifferently. The Dragon King from the Dragon Palace on Earth? The sea god stared at Wang Xian expressionlessly and continued to ask. That's right. I'm here to seek an explanation for the destruction of my Dragon Palace. Wang Xian nodded his head lightly and questioned. This? All the disciples of the Divine Sea Palace around them were shocked when they saw the Dragon King facing their sea god nonchalantly. Where did the Dragon King get his confidence from? Whoosh! 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 While the sea god was conversing with Wang Xian, millions of creatures from the entire Divine Sea Palace had gathered. Among them, there were mermaids and humans. Their bodies were emitting a terrifying power. Lord Sea God, please calm down. Let's kill these reckless fools! 5 old men who were emitting a terrifying aura took a step forward and spoke to the sea god. Father, that middle-aged swordsman has the strength of a peak demigod. The son of deity pointed at Aojian and spoke with a slight fear in his heart. A bunch of fellows who didn't ignite the divine fire dare to barge into my god's kingdom? The sea god stared at Wang Xian and the rest with disdain as he spoke coldly. If you don't give me a reply regarding the destruction of the Dragon Palace, I will have to settle it in my own way. Wang Xian saw that the sea god didn't reply to him and reminded him calmly. Chapter 1820. 1820 God died. The world was in a state of shock. Ha ha ha, let our Divine Sea Palace give you an explanation. Let our sea god give you an explanation. You dare to kill people in our Divine Sea Palace. All of you are destined to die here. What Dragon King of the Dragon Palace? Die. Faced with Wang Xian's final reminder, the sea god stood in the sky above the Divine Sea Palace and stared at them coldly. His eyes were filled with coldness and disdain. The 5 old men who were walking over were filled with rage and murderous intent as they roared. As soon as they finished their words, 3 of them started to move. There were 2 mermaids. One of them was a human. The mermaids were holding a trident while the other old man was holding a spear. The three of them waved their hands in front of them. Boom! 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 3 streams of water that were 10 meters thick attacked Wang Xian and the rest directly. As soon as he finished speaking, he was killed. On Earth, those in the realm of longevity were known as demigods. As for the 3 of them, they were all at the peak of the demigod realm, and were only 1 step away from the divine level. They did not put them in their eyes when they faced the 3 fellows who did not ignite the divine fire. Very good. Since you guys destroyed my dragon palace back then, I shall destroy your divine sea palace today. Wang Xian's expression did not change at all when he saw the 3 attacks. Clang! 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 Ao Jian, who was standing at the side, pointed his long sword. 6 intersecting metal swords met the 3 attacks head-on. Bang! A violent collision sounded. Ao Jian stood proudly in front of them and easily blocked the 3 attacks. Ha! Ao Jian's strength stunned the 3 peak-stage demigod powerhouses who were attacking him. Their faces revealed a look of surprise and their expressions became solemn. Father, it's that middle-aged swordsman. Their strength is terrifying. They killed more than 10,000 guards of our divine sea palace in one move. Seeing that the attacks of the 3 peak-stage demigod experts of their divine sea palace had been blocked, the divine son and goddess said with an embarrassed expression. If he hadn't taken out the defensive weapon that his father had given him, he would have been killed by that attack. They are still ants if they haven't ignited the divine fire. Even if they have ignited the divine fire and entered my god kingdom, they will still die. The sea god didn't show any sign that Ao Jian could withstand his subordinates' attacks. Chop off their limbs and suppress the ice domain until they die. Anyone who dares to kill my god sea palace's disciples and anyone related to them will be suppressed. The sea god judged indifferently, and slowly raised his head. He stood high above and judged the sins of the human world. Boom! An extremely terrifying divine power pressed toward Wang Xian and the rest. Yes! The 5 powerhouses at the peak of the demigod realm cupped their hands. With the suppression of the divine kingdom, it was easy for them to cut off the limbs of the other party. This Dragon King appeared out of nowhere and actually has such a powerful subordinate. However, he dares to barge into Father's divine kingdom without lighting the divine fire. What a fool! Seeing her father getting angry, the goddess stared coldly at Wang Xian and the other 2. The Dragon King is done for. Lord Sea God said that they didn't even become gods without igniting the divine flame. Furthermore, they are in Lord Sea God's divine kingdom. This is simply courting death. Back then, the Dragon King fought his way here undefeated. Now, things are different from the past. He actually dared to barge into our divine sea palace. He's courting death. The Dragon King's power is indeed terrifying, but he's too confident. It's good that he's dead. At the training ground, everyone watched this scene with indifference, and even some schadenfreude. The Dragon King's power surprised them greatly. However, they were disciples of the Divine Sea Palace after all. If the Dragon King came to cause trouble, he would be their enemy. Now that he was killed, they were happy to see it. A true god who only lit a wisp of divine fire dares to be so high and mighty? Wang Xian looked at the sea god who was looking down at them and smiled contemptuously. Bang! When Wang Xian finished his words, a heavy collision sound was heard. Boom! 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 Following that, the entire Divine Sea Palace trembled. Cracks slowly appeared on the ground of the Divine Kingdom. What? The tremor of the Divine Kingdom and the collapse of the ground of the Divine Kingdom caused everyone's expressions to change drastically. The high and mighty sea god lost his calmness from before. His pupils contracted slightly as he looked at Ao Qitian beside him. The 3-colored Goyu's pupils flickered with violent power. Flames, lightning, and demonic chi churned on his body. A golden cudgel weapon appeared in his hand. The cudgel landed on the Divine Kingdom, and the cracks spread to the surrounding areas. No one dares to stand high in front of our Dragon King. If there is one, let him be turned into ashes. A violent voice came out of Ao Qitian's mouth. His three Goyu eyes stared at the sea god and slowly landed on the 5 peak stage demigod powerhouses who were rushing toward them. Buzz! The three Goyu began to spin in his eyes, and a violent energy burst out of his eyes. Boom! 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 In an instant, a violent explosion sounded from all directions. No, what kind of power is this? The 5 peak stage demigod experts who rushed over felt that their bodies were actually slowly splitting apart. Their faces revealed a terrified expression as they shouted loudly. They could only watch as their bodies split apart, and their expressions were filled with terror. Bang! A violent explosion came from their bodies. In an instant, the 5 peak stage demigod experts were annihilated. Not only them, but the surrounding buildings also exploded. Without any warning, no one saw Ao Chitian's attack. Rumble! The destruction of the Divine Kingdom caused the entire Divine Sea Palace to roar, and the surrounding sea area was even more violent. How dare a tiny wisp of divine fire god act so arrogantly in front of our Dragon King? Roar! A loud explosion exploded, and the 5 peak stage demigod experts were reduced to ashes. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and horror. However, at this moment, a violent voice once again resounded throughout the entire Divine Sea Palace. Ao Chitian held the ocean-pacifying divine needle in his hand, and his body slowly grew to the size of 20 meters. His incomparably violent aura broke through the restraints of the Divine Kingdom. The Divine Sea Palace's suppression on him had become a complete joke. Today, the god dies! Ao Chitian's incomparably tyrannical eyes stared at the sea god, and his body moved, instantly appearing in front of the sea god. How is this possible? You clearly didn't ignite the divine fire. How could you have such terrifying strength? At this moment, seeing the collapse of the Divine Kingdom, a look of shock and fear appeared in Sea God's eyes, and he shouted in disbelief. He raised the trident in his hand and raised it horizontally to block the position in front of him. Bang! An incomparably loud collision sound was heard, and the violent power and violent attributes caused Sea God's expression to change drastically. His body was like an ant in front of Ao Chitian, and he directly fell toward the position below. Boom! The sea god's huge body sank into the bottom of the sea. With just one strike, the sea god, who was known as invincible on earth, fell into the bottom of the sea. Chapter 1821. 1821 God died, and the world cried out in grief. Boom! 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 The surface of the Pacific Ocean suddenly shook, and the sea water began to churn irregularly. In the sky above the entire Spirit Sea Palace, some of the sea water was churning in all directions, completely violating the rules of nature. From 5 minutes ago, the entire ocean had undergone a terrifying change, attracting the attention of countless experts. In the coastal city, some powerful warriors hesitated for a moment before flying over. The disciples of the Divine Sea Palace outside were flying over quickly. Ahem! 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 At the bottom of the sea of the Divine Sea Palace, Sea God stood up slowly from the bottom of the sea with a pale face. He held the trident in his right hand and stared at Ao Chitian with an extremely embarrassed expression. With every cough, he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. With one strike, Sea God was seriously injured. Father! Father! Lord Sea God! My God, how could it be? How could it be? How could that ape-man be so strong? The divine sons and goddesses cried out in surprise, and the expressions of the disciples of the Divine Sea Palace changed drastically. As for the people at the training ground, they were completely dumbfounded. Their sea god, a true god, had been directly thrown into the bottom of the sea by one of the Dragon King's subordinates. In a one-hit confrontation, the sea god was completely at a disadvantage. You, a demon beast who hasn't become a god, can actually erupt with such terrifying power. Could it be a powerful bloodline creature? The sea god slowly stood up and held his trident. He stared at Ao Chitian with an extremely unsightly expression and roared in a low voice. Buzz! As soon as he finished speaking, a blue light flowed toward his body from the ground. Above him, an ocean whirlpool appeared. His pale face slowly turned red. This scene looked extremely cool and magical. Ao Chitian of the Demon Combat Division of the Dragon Palace, please enlighten me. Ao Chitian waved the ocean-pacifying divine needle in his hand. His figure moved and appeared in front of the sea god as if he had teleported. The enormous ocean-pacifying needle once again smashed down heavily. Ding! This is my divine kingdom. Here, my strength can be unleashed to infinity. You didn't ignite the divine fire. No matter how strong your bloodline is, I'm not afraid of you. Sea God's eyes were slightly red as he stared at the ocean-pacifying needle that was once again smashing down at him. He stretched out his arm, and the trident met it once again. This time, the blue light below and the whirlpool in the sky gathered directly on the tip of the trident. It was incomparably terrifying. A crisp collision sound rang out. The sea god's body collapsed a little towards the area below. His gaze was filled with killing intent as he stared at Ao Chitian. This attack was evenly matched. Roar! With such strength, you still dare to provoke our Dragon King! Ao Chitian and the other two Goyus stared at the sea god with contempt. Boom! Crackle! In an instant, a blood-red flame ignited on his body. In the middle of the blood-red flame, there were streaks of blood-red lightning-like stripes that made up for it. A violent aura that made one's scalp tingle was emitted from his body. The blood-red flame mixed with lightning spread toward the ocean-pacifying needle and attacked the sea god again. Unparalleled strength and violent attributes. This was the strongest dragon of the Dragon Palace, the Berserk Dragon. An existence that was at the peak of the universe. What kind of bloodline is this? The sea god's expression changed slightly when he saw the change in Ao Chitian's body. This violent aura made his heart skip a beat. Ocean, listen to my command. Kill! The sea god roared, and in an instant, the seawater within a radius of 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers came to a complete stop. Following that, waves of terrifying energy gathered toward his trident. Boom! The dazzling blue light gathered at one point and once again met Ao Chitian's attack. Bang! A terrifying wave of air rushed toward the surrounding areas. The entire Divine Kingdom was trembling, and some items in the Divine Kingdom flew into the distance. If it weren't for the existence of the Divine Palace here, the entire Pacific Ocean would have drowned all the surrounding coastal cities. Oh! Under Ao Chitian's attack, the sea god roared furiously. He held the trident with both hands, and his expression was extremely ferocious. Bang! 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 Ao Chitian withdrew the ocean-pacifying divine needle and then smashed it at the sea god at a terrifying speed. The sound of the trident and the ocean-pacifying divine needle colliding could be heard, and the sound of close combat could be heard continuously. In the Divine Kingdom, one by one, the buildings were collapsing violently. The disciples of the Divine Sea Palace retreated backward in fear, their faces full of astonishment. How? How could this be? A small dragon palace on Earth, a weak force, actually. The divine sons and goddesses saw the violent demon monkey fighting with their father, and saw cracks appearing in the Divine Kingdom. Their expressions changed drastically. In the Divine Kingdom, their father had an almost endless supply of power. Even if he was severely injured, he could recover quickly. Under such circumstances, he was still unable to suppress the other party. One could imagine how terrifying the other party's strength was. Just one of the Dragon King's subordinates is already so terrifying. Just how powerful is the Dragon King? At this moment, a voice filled with fear suddenly came from behind. The disciples of the Divine Sea Palace immediately looked to the side. The young man had been standing beside the battle. He had a smile on his face, and he stood calmly with his hands behind his back. Ever since he came to the Divine Sea Palace, the legendary Dragon King had always been calm and collected, regardless of whether it was the appearance of the sea god or the attack of the experts of the Divine Sea Palace. He had always been so calm, as if he didn't take the sea god palace and the sea god seriously. This made them think of what the Dragon King and the violent ape man had said. A true god with a wisp of divine fire. Before the Earth's revival and the arrival of the gods, the Dragon King had established the Dragon Palace, which shook the world and had a group of powerful underlings. Now that his underlings could fight against the sea god, how strong would he be? He would definitely be stronger than his underlings. At the thought of this, the divine sons and goddesses trembled, and their eyes were full of fear. Bang! At this moment, the sound of a violent collision rang out again, and the expressions of all the disciples of the divine sea palace changed drastically. Under the violent ape-man's attack, the sea god was once again sent flying into the distance. The immense power caused the sea god's body to break the pillars of the divine sea palace one by one. A large mouthful of blood was spat out from the sea god's mouth, and his neat hair was completely disheveled. What a powerful bloodline power! What a powerful bloodline power! I admit defeat! I admit defeat! The sea god looked at his sunken body and roared with a face full of fear. Countless blue lights within the god nation healed his injuries. However, in just a minute of exchanging blows, the sea god had already realized that he was no match for this demonic beast. Chapter 1822. 1822. The world of 1822 shook. Sea God was a little terrified, and a faint fear rose in his heart. He looked at Aochitian, who was extremely violent and powerful. As he flew backward, he saw the Dragon King's calm expression. When he saw the calm face without any surprise, he suddenly felt a faint sense of despair. A subordinate of the Dragon King was able to completely suppress him. How powerful was the Dragon King? How could there be such a powerful indigenous people on Earth? He was a god who had descended, but he was an invincible existence. He would never have thought that he would encounter such a terrifying enemy on Earth. When he descended, the Dragon Palace on Earth was no different from an ant in their eyes. The voice of begging for mercy and admitting defeat rang out in the entire Divine Sea Palace. All the disciples in the Spirit Sea Palace widened their eyes and were filled with shock. Their god had actually admitted defeat. He admitted defeat to the Dragon King. It's too late. Wang Xian looked at the sea god indifferently. Why was he so high and mighty just now? He even thought that he was an invincible existence. If they weren't a match for the sea god, they would be suppressed in the ice domain until they died. This was especially so since the sea god had once said that he would kill all his family and friends. Wang Xian hated it the most when others threatened him. Those who threatened him would have to bear the consequences. Die! Roar! Aochitian let out a violent roar. The ocean-pacifying needle in his hand grew to 1,000 meters in size. The ocean-pacifying needle, which was covered in flames, darkness, and lightning, was filled with destructive power. You want to kill me? Dream on! I'm a god from the boundless star field, a god from the boundless sea! Sea God roared with a savage face. A dazzling blue divine screen appeared in front of him. He waved his trident, and the divine screen attacked Aochitian. Explode! Aochitian saw the divine screen, and the strength of his arm increased. The 1,000-meter-large sea-pacifying divine needle shot forward. Crack! 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 The sound of breaking was heard, and pieces of indestructible materials fell from the sky above the divine kingdom. The divine screen slowly cracked, and continued to attack him. Blood prison, mad dragon, die! The moment the sea-pacifying needle broke the divine screen, Aochitian released the sea-pacifying needle, and his figure instantly appeared in the sky above the sea god. The dark dragon, thunder dragon, and fire dragon appeared behind him, hovering behind Aochitian. He waved his arm and smashed it toward the sea god. The 3 dragons behind him entered Aochitian's body and burst out of his fist. Boom! The huge fist landed on the sea god's body. He stared at Aochitian with his blood-red eyes. His body began to crack slowly. Woo woo woo! A mournful cry came from the divine sea palace. At that moment, a drop of bright blood entered the divine realm from behind sea god. The mournful cry came to an abrupt end. Lord Sea God! Lord Sea God has fallen! No, 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 Father! How is this possible? Sea God has actually fallen? Oh my God! Shocking voices rang out in the Divine Sea Palace, and the bodies of the million experts in the palace trembled violently. The eyes of the Son of God and the Goddess were red. Their faces were filled with grief and despair. Sea God, do you still want to escape in front of me? However, at this moment, a calm voice rang out again. What? When everyone heard this, they immediately turned to look at the Dragon King. Sea God, you destroyed my dragon palace and killed the disciples of my dragon palace. Don't even think about escaping today, Wang Xian said slowly again. He had clearly seen the collapse of the sea god's body, and the escape of the drop of divine blood from the sea god. After becoming a god, the most powerful thing was not the qualitative change of one's strength, but the qualitative change of one's physical body. A drop of blood could be resurrected, but a severed head could still be resurrected. As for the regeneration of a severed arm, it was a piece of cake. The sea god had said at the end that it was wishful thinking to kill him. If Wang Xian didn't use his yin-yang and five elements dragon eyes to observe, it would have been difficult for him to notice that a drop of the sea god's divine blood was escaping. At the very least, Ao Qitian didn't notice it. Unfortunately, the sea god was destined to die today. As for you, the disciples of the Divine Sea Palace, you have followed the wrong master. Wang Xian glanced at everyone around him and said indifferently. Buzz. After he finished speaking, the virtual image of the Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom slowly appeared behind him. The current Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom covered an area of 200 kilometers. The virtual Dragon Kingdom emitted an unparalleled and terrifying pressure. Even the position of the Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom seemed extremely tiny in front of it. Roar! 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 The roars of dragons came from the Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom. The terrifying pressure made all the disciples in the Divine Sea Palace tremble. What? What is he doing? Did he discover me? At this moment, in the center of the Divine Sea Palace, a drop of the god's blood of the sea god was hidden below. Sensing the appearance of the Divine Shadow Dragon Kingdom behind Wang Xian, the god's blood of the sea god was fluctuating violently. When he begged for mercy and the other party did not agree, the sea god was already prepared to escape. As long as he escaped, even without the Divine Kingdom, he could slowly recover in a few decades. In fact, when Earth wandered to the boundless star field a few years later, he could return to the boundless sea and ask his master and senior brothers to help him recondense the divine seat. At that time, he would ask his master and the others to help him take revenge. He was already prepared for everything. But when he saw the shadow that contained a terrifying power, he had a bad premonition. What is the Dragon King doing? What is that terrifying shadow behind him? What does he mean? Did we follow the wrong master? Is he going to kill us? No, no! In the Spirit Sea Palace, all the disciples of the Sea God Palace looked terrified. Dragon King, don't kill us! No, we are also citizens of Earth! Some of the young and middle-aged men shouted in panic. Buzz. Faced with the begging voices around him, Wang Xian didn't show any signs of change. At this moment, a scene that shocked everyone appeared. The mysterious and terrifying palace that was 200 kilometers long actually started to devour the Sea God Palace. That's right, it was devouring. The mysterious and terrifying palace was devouring the Sea God Palace bit by bit. This was the Sea God's divine kingdom, and it was being devoured bit by bit. What's going on? No, 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 he's devouring my divine kingdom! He's devouring my divine kingdom! The sea god felt this scene and was shocked. He roared in his heart. What the hell was this Dragon King? How could he be so terrifying? Run, run now! He controlled the divine blood and tried to run away. Roar! However, at this moment, a terrifying suction force came from the mysterious palace. The sea god, who had only one drop of divine blood left, couldn't resist at all. No, 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 no! How could I die on this small planet? The sea god's true voice of despair, resounding throughout the palace. Chapter 1823. 1823. The 1823 world shook. This. When the sea god's voice suddenly filled the divine sea palace again, all the disciples' eyes were blank, and their faces were filled with shock. Whoosh! At this moment, everyone saw a drop of blood containing enormous energy fly towards the mysterious palace. No, Father! When the divine sons and goddesses saw the drop of divine blood, they naturally knew what was unexpected. This meant that their father had completely fallen. Woo woo woo! A sorrowful cry came from the divine kingdom. The sea god had completely fallen. A god, from igniting the divine fire to condensing the divine spark, to finally lifting the divine kingdom. The ascension of a god could cause a huge change in the world. It could cause the purple clouds to come from the east, and it could cause a certain attribute to jump in joy. However, when a god fell, it could also cause a huge change in the world. When a certain attribute of a god fell, a certain attribute within a radius of at least 10,000 kilometers would let out a sorrowful cry. This sound represented the sorrowful cry of the world. At the same time, this attribute within a radius of 10,000 kilometers would undergo a special change. Walala! Strangely, on the surface of the Pacific Ocean, the waves that were surging earlier slowly calmed down. In the sky, heavy rain fell without any warning. Amidst the heavy rain, there were cries of grief. This was the grief of the water attribute. This represented the death of a water attribute god. Within a radius of 10,000 kilometers, the coastal cities by the sea were all covered by heavy rain. Suddenly, the heavy rain, without any warning, without the slightest lightning or thunder, began to pour down. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. When the mournful cries were heard, countless people widened their eyes, their faces filled with shock. Torrential rain, the mournful cries of heaven and earth, and the fall of the water god. The current earth was not like the past, where they knew nothing about cultivation. After the teachings of the various divine kingdom experts, they understood a lot. Among them were records of the death of gods and the wailing of heaven and earth. This was the first time they had seen such a scene, but it was exactly the same as the records. In the skyscraping treasured palace located in the eastern sky, a few middle-aged men and women in the palace revealed shocked expressions when they heard the commotion from the Pacific Ocean. Their figures moved, and illusory shadows appeared above the skyscraping treasured palace. Poseidon is dead! Who did it? On the entire earth, only the Templars people can make the sea god die without even a chance to escape. Could it be them? I don't think so. The Templars people have a good relationship with the endless sea. They won't make Poseidon die completely. Could it be? Those gods who almost died and blended into earth to recover their strength. It's possible, but there's another possibility. After the great war on earth in the ancient times, those ancient gods who left their divine blood behind. The earth's spiritual energy has only recovered for a dozen years, but someone actually killed a god. Let's pay attention. After all, earth was once glorious. It should be a powerful god from the ancient times. He is gradually being revived because of this spiritual essence restoration. 10,000 meters above the Lishao treasured palace, a few figures were talking. They were looking at the divine sea palace with serious expressions. At the same time, at the equator, above the enormous throne of the fire god palace. In the west, on the divine mountain that was emitting divine flames in the sky, there was a huge figure floating at the top of the pyramid. All of them looked at the sky and the direction of the sea god palace. The fall of the sea god Poseidon shocked them. However, when they thought of this planet, they fell silent again. The earth had given birth to many starry forces, but in a battle, the incomparably huge earth had become a small ball. The spiritual energy had been completely exhausted, and even the starry sky had been called the abandoned domain of the gods. Even though they were gods, they were still extremely surprised that this planet had given birth to humans, and that the spiritual energy had been restored. The once dazzling planet was undergoing changes that even they couldn't predict. A god has fallen. There are 2 water gods on Earth, and in the direction of the Pacific Ocean there is a sea god. The sea god has fallen. Heavens, not long ago, the entire ocean underwent a terrifying transformation. Now, the sea god has fallen. This is too terrifying. Who did this? Did other gods do this? A god has fallen, and even a god has fallen. Compared to the solemn shock of the gods, the others were even more shocked. The sea god was the only god on Earth who had ever made a move. Just as he descended, the trident lightly waved, and an attack covering an area of 20 kilometers directly destroyed the dragon palace at the bottom of the sea. It was said that the sea god hadn't even revealed a tenth of his strength. But now, the sea god had fallen. The gods were shocked, and the world was shaken. The entire earth was in an uproar, and countless people were discussing the matter of the sea god. Among them, there were also people who looked in the direction of the Pacific Ocean in a daze, and their faces were filled with contemplation. No one would have thought that the sea god's fall was because the Dragon King had returned. After 12 years, the Dragon King had become a memory to them. They had forgotten about it. This was a glorious era, an era where heaven's favorites were rampant. At the same time, at the position of the Divine Sea Palace, all the disciples of the Divine Sea Palace were feeling the changes in the world. When they saw the Divine Kingdom being slowly devoured, despair appeared on their faces. No, no, no! Don't kill us! Don't devour us! Terrified pleas for mercy rang out. Wang Xian didn't show any signs of change. The Dragon Palace has devoured the water elemental Divine Kingdom. They are still short of the 7 divine kingdoms of metal, wood, wind, thunder, darkness, light, and darkness. They will be able to level up. The divine kingdom of the Dragon God had already been devoured by the Dragon Palace. The Sea God Palace was the second one. The divine kingdom was converted into materials for the Dragon Palace to level up. Meanwhile, the experts of the Sea God Palace would become resources for the members of the Dragon Palace to level up. The law of the universe, the strong prey on the weak. Wan Xian stood there without any change in his expression. Both parties were enemies. It was either one of them, or the other. The Divine Sea Palace was slowly being devoured. Some of the corpses of the marine race turned into dragon energy, and entered his body. It was a pity that the sea god did not belong to the marine race. Otherwise, devouring the energy of a god would increase his dragon energy by a lot. However, at this moment, a large amount of dragon blood was flowing out of the mouths of the 9 dragon pillars in the dragon transformation pool. The enormous amount of dragon blood stunned Prime Minister Gui. Such a large amount of dragon blood could help a leader of the Dragon Palace advance to the godly state. Ao Xingmu, enter the dragon transformation pool and advance to the godly state. Prime Minister Gui hesitated for a moment, and called Ao Xingmu over. The potential of the Starwood Dragon was greater than that of the other dragon species. Once they became gods, their fire attributes would recover and they would have 2 attributes. They would be the peak dragon species of the Dragon Palace. Chapter 1824 1824 1824 Ancient Gods, Ancient Mountains, and Ancient Lands. Buzz. At the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, the Sea God Palace that once occupied an area of 1,000 kilometers was slowly being devoured. Standing at the bottom of the ocean, it was awe-inspiring. The holy land of water attribute cultivators was gradually being wiped out. When the last scream came to an abrupt end, the entire space shook as if it had regained its clarity. There were no traces of water flowing down from the entire sea. Wan Xian was floating in the middle of the Sea God Palace. Ao Jian, Ao Qitian, and the rest had flown to his left and right. Devil 15 and Devil 16, who were standing at the side, watched this scene in shock. Their eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. Just now, they witnessed the destruction of a divine kingdom and the fall of a god. Their Dragon King didn't make a move other than summoning the mysterious and terrifying palace at the last moment. Even without the Dragon King, the experts of the Dragon Palace could kill the sea god. The Dragon King was so powerful that they could never imagine it. Our invincible Dragon King is back! MO15 and MO16 looked at each other with excitement. Disciples of the Dragon Gate pay their respects to the Dragon King! The two of them did not hesitate at all. They knelt in the middle of the ocean and shouted loudly. Dragon Gate! Wang Xian looked at them and smiled faintly. Back on Earth, after the rise of the Dragon Palace, the Dragon Gate gradually declined. He did not bother about the disciples of the Dragon Gate anymore. Now that he saw his loyal subordinates from more than 10 years ago kneeling in front of him, he felt a little emotional. Get up! Wang Xian waved his hands gently. The powerful force made them stand up immediately. We're going to Jiang City. Let's talk while we walk, he said to the two Dragon Gate disciples. It's the Dragon King! The two of them nodded respectfully. Ao Jian waved his arms and two sharp swords appeared under their feet. The five of them flew directly to the surface of the sea. Splash! When they flew out of the water, the sound of a rainstorm was heard. The entire world seemed to be completely covered by the rainstorm. Ordinary people could not even see a place 5 or 6 meters away. Not good, they are out. Fortunately, my heaven and earth concealment technique is also extremely powerful in this starry sky. Even a godly state expert would find it difficult to find me. Was the person who destroyed the sea god just now the young man in the middle? It didn't seem to be someone from the other 4 factions. FUCK, he destroyed everyone in the entire Divine Sea Palace. Not a single one was spared. This person is a ruthless person. Could he be like me? An almighty who only resurrected after a drop of divine blood was restored to his spiritual energy? That's impossible. I think I'm very awesome, but I've only just reached the threshold of a demigod in a short span of more than 10 years. At this moment, in a hidden corner 20 kilometers away from Wang Xian and the rest, a young man was hiding in the rain. He looked at Wang Xian and the rest, mumbling non-stop. As the saying goes, a man of great skill is bold. When something happened at the Divine Sea Palace, he rushed over immediately. He happened to see the scene of Wang Xian and the rest coming out. Towards this young man who was standing in the middle and was able to destroy the sea god, his face was filled with astonishment. Looks like I have to be more careful in the future. I'd better be a good second generation. TSK. The young man smiled. His figure flashed as he prepared to flee into the distance. However, all of a sudden, the young man sensed that the young man was looking in his direction. Oh no, I've been discovered. How is this possible? My heaven and earth concealment technique is the best concealment technique in this starry sky. Even the eternal God Lord might not be able to discover it. Damn it! The young man's brows suddenly jumped. Looking at that calm gaze, he nearly wet his pants in fear. He turned around and fled in terror. Pun! However, just as he turned around, he bumped into an indestructible invisible wall. This caused the young man's expression to change drastically. Sensing the gaze from the back, his expression changed drastically. Big brother, this little brother is just passing by. This little brother is just passing by. I don't have any other intentions. I beg Big Brother to let this little brother off. In the future, when I see Big Brother, this little brother will definitely take a detour. Please spare my life, Big Brother. Plop! The young man's expression changed. With a plop, he knelt down in the void and shouted with a sad face. FUCK, the master in front of him had killed the sea god. Not a single disciple of the Divine Sea Palace was left. He was spying here. Maybe this ruthless man wanted to kill him. He had been silent on Earth for more than 100,000 years. It was not easy for him to revive after encountering the recovery of the spiritual essence. He did not want to die. If he died again, it would be very difficult for him to be revived. He shouted to the front with an aggrieved look on his face. He looked like a coward. 20 kilometers away, Wang Xian was sizing up this young man. He did not look old, but he had the strength that was close to that of a demigod. Wanshou was called a demigod on Earth and would be collectively called a demigod in the future. Most importantly, Wang Xian discovered that this young man's body contained some kind of divinity. It was the kind of energy that only a god could possess. Looking at Wang Xian's scrutinizing gaze, the young man's heart trembled. This guy wasn't trying to kill him, right? "Brother, please spare my life!" the young man begged loudly again. "Let's go!" From afar, Wang Xian saw the young man begging for mercy. He smiled faintly and said to Aojian and Aochitian. Turning around, the five of them flew rapidly toward the east. "Phew, which god is that young man? He seems to possess terrifying ocular skills, and the strength in his body is also somewhat terrifying. Fuck, too many gods died in that huge battle more than 100,000 years ago. I wonder which guy shed the blood of God." When the young man saw Wang Xian and the rest leaving, he wiped the raindrops on his forehead. These raindrops were mixed with his cold sweat. "Let's go! Let's go!" He moved his body and flew rapidly towards a distant location. After flying for about 100 kilometers, an incomparably huge yacht was parked in the middle of the sea. The yacht was no longer the same as it was on Earth. It was filled with mystical patterns. On the side of the yacht, there were 4 big words: Chiffon Corporation. "Young master, you're finally back. We were worried sick." The young man flew over, and a dozen middle-aged men dressed neatly on the yacht shouted at the young man anxiously. Okay, what could possibly happen to me?" The young man slightly puffed out his chest and waved at them proudly. His pride and arrogance were reflected in his body. It was as if he was not the one who was kneeling there and begging for mercy. If anyone else on Earth saw this ship, they would definitely recognize it at a glance. The Chiffon Group was one of the 3 major pharmaceutical industries in the East. And that young man was the famous eldest young master of the Chiffon Group, the current 2nd generation rich in the East. Their pharmaceutical business had already reached the Lingxiao Palace. Chapter 1825. 1825 1825 Ancient Gods, Ancient Mountains, and Ancient Underground. The Earth has changed so much in the past 10 years. In the sky, Wang Xian and the rest flew toward Dongfangjiang City. They looked down at the unfamiliar city and muttered to themselves. "Dragon King, during these 10 years, the Earth has been undergoing drastic changes every day, especially after the gods from beyond the heavens descended. On Earth, some of the mountain peaks have undergone drastic changes. Divine light has burst forth. There are wild beasts that can communicate with spirits, divine trees that grow, and Lingji fruits that have broken out of the ground. In the past few years, Earth has been expanding crazily. Powerful ancient lands have appeared on Earth. There are powerful demonic beasts and ferocious beasts in the ancient lands. There are also incomparably powerful formations and countless treasures. The 5 major factions have passed down cultivation methods. They have recruited disciples with great talent and entered the ancient lands of the divine mountains to search for treasures. Nowadays there is an endless competition on Earth. Each and every one of them has great strength. Some of the forces even seem to have some reservations about the 5 major forces. However, those high and mighty gods rarely interfere in the matters on Earth. Nowadays, the heavens' favorites are rampant, and the divine sons and daughters are suppressing a domain. At the side, MO15 and MO16 reported to Wang Xian with a slight sigh. The current Earth was a dazzling Earth. There were all sorts of mysterious places and all sorts of heaven's favorites competing with each other. Coupled with the fact that the current Earth was wandering and flying towards the starfield that they didn't know about, the future was filled with uncertainty and hope for everyone. The great era had arrived. "How are the Dragon Gate disciples now?" Wang Xian asked the 2 draconids. "Dragon King, after the Dragon Palace went into seclusion, the disciples of the Dragon Gate were fine. They settled down in Jiang City. Now, there are brothers who are getting married and having children. A few years ago, an ancient land appeared in Jiang City. Although it is not considered the top ancient land on Earth, it is still considered pretty good. It was occupied by the leader and the rest. Devil 15 and Devil 16 said, "It's good to get married and have children." Wang Xian nodded with a smile and looked at the vast land. In the sky, there were experts flying in the sky from time to time. Although the spiritual energy had recovered and the Earth had undergone a huge change, there were still many things that had not changed. For example, tall buildings and cars that were driving on the ground. All of them were powerful corporations. The difference was that the high-rise buildings were sturdier, the cars were more cool, and the speed and safety were more powerful. The ordinary corporations of the past were now replaced by pill manufacturing companies and weapons manufacturing companies. Entertainment venues, bars, KTVs, and the like still existed. Unfamiliar yet familiar. An incomparably huge palace stood in the sky, and one could vaguely see some people entering and leaving. From Devil 15 and Devil 16, they learned that the Lingxiao Treasured Palace was the largest faction in the east. The gods were in charge, and the heavens' favorites and divine sons and goddesses were roaming freely. That is? Wang Xian, who was flying in the sky, looked at a mountain peak below. His eyes were flashing with a mystical luster. Dragon King, that is Mount Heng. The spiritual energy has recovered, and Mount Heng has undergone a huge change. Spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits have emerged from the ground and are now occupied by a divine sun. The Draconid at the side replied. Wang Xian opened his dragon eyes of yin-yang and 5 elements, and swept his gaze across the mountain peak that was emitting divine light. Mount Heng of Southyu was also a famous mountain peak in this land. However, Mount Heng was now a few thousand meters tall. The spirit trees of transcendence level covered the entire mountain peak. The chirping of birds and beasts could be compared to some of the treasured lands of families in the transcendence continent. The god's blood. This mountain has been bathed in the god's blood. The corpses of the gods have rotted here and improved the entire Mount Heng. Wang Xian's dragon eyes of yin and yang and the 5 elements revealed a surprised expression. I know now. Why do I feel that there's something strange in the body of that young man on the surface of the sea? Looking at the mystical Mount Heng, he stopped. His eyes were flashing with astonishment. No wonder that young man possesses divinity. That young man is a god himself, a fallen god. Wang Xian's eyes were filled with radiance. Only a fallen god who was resurrected and recultivated with divine blood would have such energy in his body. If I knew this would happen, I would have captured that fellow and searched his memory with my soul. Wang Xian shook his head slightly. His body moved and he continued to fly forward. He deliberately slowed down to tour the earth after the great change. In less than an hour, another mysterious place appeared in his sight. This was a mysterious place with an area of several thousand kilometers. Wang Xian, who used to be extremely familiar with Earth, could confirm that there was no such place in the past. Dragon King, after the recovery of the spiritual energy, some of the ground suddenly appeared. This is one of them. It is called an ancient land. There are many treasures in the ancient land. It is a holy land for cultivation. However, it is also filled with danger. This is one of the 20 ancient lands of the East. Countless people enter and explore it every day. The Draconid saw Wang Xian's puzzled gaze and explained to him. Ancient land? Wang Xian looked at the area of a few thousand kilometers below him. Based on the energy in this area, he was almost certain that this was the kingdom of God. The real kingdom of God. However, this kingdom of God had been completely destroyed. Only a few things remained. It formed the ancient land on earth. Even if it was some ordinary things that were left behind in the kingdom of God, they were still rare treasures in front of ordinary cultivators. There might even be treasures that were extremely precious to the gods. It seems that the rapid rise of some people on earth has a lot to do with the kingdom of God. Wang Xian thought to himself. The divine mountain of the kingdom of God was definitely a treasure in the transcendence continent. It was an existence that even demigods yearned for. Now that there were so many ruins of the kingdom of God on earth, it was a great opportunity for cultivators. Pagoda, pagoda, pagoda. At this moment, the sound of huge beasts galloping could be heard from the front. Wang Xian looked over and saw 5 to 6 demon beasts of the insightful void tier pulling an extremely luxurious carriage as they galloped in the sky. In the surrounding area, there were also many young men riding on galloping cloud horses as they flew in the sky. The insightful void tier demon beasts pulling the carriage had a majestic aura. That should be a heaven's favorite traveling. A heaven's favorite traveling and a powerful demon beast pulling the carriage. All the heaven's favorites rose up in the ancient land. In fact, the heaven's favorites born on earth are comparable to the heaven's favorites who descended in the Lingxiao treasured palace. Listening to the explanation of the 2 draconids and looking at the majestic heaven's favorite carriage in front of him, Wang Xian revealed a smile. How interesting. The current earth wouldn't be so boring. Wang Xian smiled. The divine mountains that were bathed in the blood of the gods, the ruins of the ancient lands of the divine kingdom, and the resurrected gods. The ancient gods, ancient mountains, and ancient lands. Each and every mysterious place filled Wang Xian with curiosity. The heavens' favorites were rampant, and the sons and daughters of the gods were born. He, the Dragon King, could have a good time in this dazzling world. Chapter 1826. 1826 Ancient Land of Jade Lake. Duh. As a heaven's favorite pulled by a powerful demonic beast entered the ancient land below, another heaven's favorite pulled by a powerful demonic beast flew towards the location below in less than a minute. Why are there 2 heaven's favorites here all of a sudden? Could it be that a treasure has appeared in the ancient land? The 2 draconids who were standing beside Wang Xian were astonished when they saw another heaven's favorite flying over. Are the other ancient lands as big as this? Wang Xian looked at the divine kingdom below and asked the 2 draconids. Some are bigger than this, and some are smaller than this. The 2 draconids said. This ancient land is called the Jade Lake. It's named after the place where the Queen Mother of the West lives in the legends. The specific reason for naming the Jade Lake is that the weapons that someone obtained from this place are all female weapons. Furthermore, there's a goddess statue at the entrance. The ancient land of the Jade Lake? Wang Xian raised his eyebrows as he scanned the area below with his yin-yang and 5 elemental dragon eyes. There was a layer of energy in the divine kingdom that he could not see through. However, based on his guesses, this divine kingdom was definitely not something that ordinary gods could build. It covered an area of about 5,000 kilometers. It was considered huge in the divine kingdom. On Earth, it was even bigger. Let's go down and take a look. Wang Xian hesitated for a moment. Then, he moved his body and flew straight down. Ao Jian, Ao Qitian, and the rest followed closely behind. Wang Xian was also curious about the ancient land that suddenly appeared on Earth. Currently, the upgrade of the Dragon Palace required the engulfing of 9 attributes of the Divine Kingdom. Currently, there were still 7 attributes missing. The Divine Kingdom below was of the Wood attribute. If the conditions of the upgrade of the Dragon Palace were met, it could be completely absorbed. As a Divine Kingdom, even if it was the ruins of the Divine Kingdom, it still possessed a strong power. If one wanted to enter, one had to enter from the entrance. There were 2 entrances to the Jade Lake ancient land. Wang Xian flew towards the west entrance. According to my report, not long ago, there was a strong spiritual energy fluctuation in the ancient land of Jade Lake. It was suspected that a treasure had been unearthed. 2 Heaven's Pride prodigies, Yao Girl and Hua Yuhen, entered the ancient land of Jade Lake. Before the 2 Heaven's Pride prodigies, the 5th son of deity on the God-sealing list of the Lingxiao Treasure Hall and the group of experts in the Lingxiao Treasure Hall had also entered ahead of time. I wonder if there will be a fight. Wow, did you guys see that? The Jade Lady Heaven's favorite just now. Oh my god, she is so beautiful. I took a perfect picture just now. Haha, come, my friends, let's give them a wave of gifts. When Wang Xian had just landed in the ancient land of the Jade Lake, a lively sound was heard. Wang Xian's gaze swept across and realized that there were reporters from the television station broadcasting. There was also a live streamer. It looked extremely lively. This is really interesting. Legends and technology overlapped. Wang Xian revealed a look of interest. He looked at the entrance. It was a 2-kilometer wide entrance. The spine of the entrance was dilapidated and the words on it had disappeared. Within a few kilometers of the entrance, there was a 20-meter-long statue of a goddess. The face of the goddess was blurred and the arms of the statue were all broken. The position inside looked a little messy. A huge pillar was placed in the middle, and huge rocks were falling inside. Looking from the outside, there weren't many people inside. Wang Xian walked straight into the place. Brothers, there are people going in again. I wonder if they can come out alive. Although the ancient land of Jade Lake was built by a goddess, it is extremely dangerous inside the ancient land, especially the flower demons, tree demons, and vine demons. When the ancient land of Jade Lake appeared, all the experts from the Lishao treasured palace had entered. However, they suffered heavy losses. The voice of the streamer came from behind. Wang Xian turned a deaf ear and walked inside. The owner of this divine kingdom was definitely not a match for Wang Xian at his peak. However, he had nothing to be afraid of since he was a fallen god. After entering the dilapidated divine kingdom, a desolate aura rushed over. Wang Xian scanned his surroundings and looked ahead with his dragon eyes of yin-yang and 5 elements. The area within a radius of 5,000 kilometers was extremely huge. It was obviously impossible to walk into the interior of the divine kingdom. As his dragon eyes scanned the surroundings, a few scenes that were hundreds of kilometers ahead appeared in his vision. There were a few scenes that were missing and were blocked by a powerful energy. Let's go! Wang Xian's body trembled and he wanted to teleport into the area. Buzz. Just as he was about to appear in a certain spot in his vision, he suddenly felt a powerful binding force. Eh? Wang Xian's body stiffened slightly and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. There's actually a force here that can restrict me from teleporting. A look of astonishment appeared on his face. He could only fly over quickly. Squeak, squeak! As he flew at full speed, Wang Xian sensed some sharp sounds around him. As he swept his gaze across the surroundings, he discovered many flower demons. These huge, gorgeous flowers were able to unleash all kinds of powerful attacks. However, these flower demons were completely ignored in front of Wang Xian. The closer he got, the more various flowers, plants, and trees there were. Waves of powerful wood elemental energy were transmitted over. Wang Xian scanned his surroundings. 80% of the palaces had collapsed. Some of them were completely covered by mysterious vines. If he didn't pay attention, flower demons, tree demons, and vine demons could appear in his surroundings at any time. This should be a vine demon. It even knows how to set traps. Wang Xian looked at a spot in front of him. There was a large stretch of vines on both sides and a passageway in the middle. The vines were motionless. It was impossible to tell that it was a vine demon. It's at the void interpretation level. As expected, this ancient land of Jade Lake is not a place that ordinary people can enter. Wang Xian thought to himself as he walked straight ahead. When they reached the middle of the vines, Aojian gave it a cold glance. Following that, they walked straight in. So strong! The humans outside are getting stronger. When Wang Xian and the rest left, the vine demon quickly fled into the distance. It flew straight ahead without any obstruction. The deeper they went, the stronger the flower demon and tree demon were. When they flew for more than 2,000 kilometers, the various plant-type demonic beasts in the vicinity had already reached the demigod realm. They continued flying forward and soon arrived at the center. There are traces of battle, and it should have happened in the past few years. When he arrived at the center, a tree with a radius of 20 kilometers appeared in his line of sight. The tree was only 100 meters tall, and there was a huge group of wooden houses on it. At this moment, 80% of the wooden houses had been destroyed. This destruction should have happened in the past few years. Those who managed to get here should be the gods. Even if there are treasures here, they might have been taken away. Wang Xian was floating there. A terrifying energy was emitted from his body as he sized up his surroundings. Chapter 1827. 1827. In 1827, a blade of grass cut through the sun, moon, and stars. At the center of the ancient land of Jade Lake, Wang Xian was floating in the sky as he scanned his surroundings. Some of the demonic vines below did not dare to act rashly under his imposing manner. To be able to become a god, each and every one of them was a proud son of heaven and earth. They had descended to earth for the treasures here. With the appearance of the ruins of the kingdom of God, they would definitely come here to search and take away all the precious treasures. Even if there were some things left behind, they wouldn't be interested in them. Perhaps they were left behind for the sake of some disciples. The chances of me being able to get away from the gods are rather slim. Wang Xian frowned slightly. However, he wasn't too disappointed. He came here just to take a look. In the divine kingdom now, apart from the various plant-type demonic beasts, there were also some spiritual herbs and the like. At the moment, he wasn't interested in them at all. There were simply too many spiritual herbs and spiritual trees in the Dragon Palace. Even if they were at the demigod level, there were at least a few thousand of them. So many treasures! At this moment, the exclamations of the two draconids could be heard from the side. They looked at the spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits below with burning eyes. Wang Xian was stunned for a moment before he smiled. These spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits were nothing to him. However, to the draconids who were only at the transcendent stage, they were indeed rare treasures. He waved his arm and the spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits below all flew towards him. Whoosh! 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 However, at this moment, the flower demons, vine demons, and tree demons that grew on the special giant tree with a radius of 20 kilometers below attacked Wang Xian. Eh? They dared to attack? Wang Xian was slightly surprised. He waved his arm and the powerful destructive force caused them to wither. Spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits continued to fly toward him. Do you guys know this special tree below? Wang Xian threw the spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits directly to the two draconids. His gaze landed on the tree with a diameter of 20 kilometers below. This tree was very strange. When he looked at it, it was obvious that it was some kind of powerful tree that was cut off from 100 meters away. Then, it was placed in the kingdom of God as the trunk of a tree house. This didn't seem too strange. However, in the instant just now, Wang Xian suddenly sensed a special fluctuation coming from this tree. This fluctuation was a very weak fluctuation when these flower demons and tree demons were attacking. This special fluctuation was very weak. Wang Xian was sure that even the god who ignited the 9 wisps of divine fire couldn't sense it. If he didn't have the ancestral tree, he wouldn't have been able to sense it either. I don't recognize it. The two draconids shook their heads. Wang Xian landed on the tree and touched it with his hand. He didn't feel any life force on the tree. In other words, the tree was dead. The system couldn't find out the name of the tree either. This meant that it wasn't some divine tree. But that fluctuation just now did indeed come from this tree. Could there be some treasure? Wang Xian's interest was piqued. The gods that descended on earth were very strong, but the owner of this divine kingdom was obviously not weak either. If she really wanted to spend a lot of effort to hide something, it would be difficult for other gods to discover it. Buzz. He closed his eyes and communicated with the ancestral tree. His consciousness slowly reached into the tree below. In an instant, a tree with a radius of 20 kilometers appeared clearly in front of him. Even the roots below were clearly visible. This is... All of a sudden, Wang Xian noticed that there was a root extending further away from the tree. He looked at the strange root and was pleasantly surprised. Maybe I can really touch the treasure. Wang Xian opened his eyes and walked towards the west along the route. What a long route! I have walked at least 1,000 kilometers. This god actually went through so much trouble. It's definitely not an ordinary treasure. Wang Xian was pleasantly surprised. Everyone, be careful. Don't get entangled by these tree demons. Yao girl, control your flower demons to defend against the dozens of tree demons at the 8th level of the see-through realm. No, my flower demons can't defend against them at all. How can there be such a powerful tree demon here? Let me help you. There are so many powerful tree demons guarding this place. The treasures inside are definitely not simple. Son of Deity, let's make a deal first. We will split the treasures inside equally. Just when Wang Xian was about to reach the end of the route, the sound of a fight suddenly came from the front. Wang Xian looked over and saw more than 300 people fighting with a group of tree demons. The tree demons were more than 10 meters tall. They had strange eyes and ferocious mouths on their main trunks. They waved their branches and emitted terrifying attacks. The one fighting with them was a middle-aged man with the strongest strength, a rank 1 demigod expert. At this moment, he was fighting with a rank 1 demigod tree demon, and the powerful battle affected an area of more than 30 kilometers. This was also because of the kingdom of God. If it was outside, the battle of a demigod expert could cover an area of several hundred kilometers. Other than one demigod, the strongest person was a youth dressed in a yellow robe. The word God was written on the chest of the yellow robe. The other stronger person was a woman with a good figure who looked extremely arrogant. Next was a youth dressed in bright clothes. These three were extraordinary among the 300 people. They had towering horns on their heads and were very eye-catching and dazzling. Although they were only at the 8th level of the see-through realm, they all possessed powerful abilities. The end of this route is actually here. Wang Xian looked at the spot in front of them where the battle was taking place. There was a crack there. The crack was more than 10 meters long and the surrounding area was densely packed with tree demons. Looks like the treasure is there. My luck is pretty good. Wang Xian revealed a smile. He moved his body and flew straight into the crack. Oh no, someone is trying to catch the cicada with a mantis. Damn it, he actually rushed and while we were holding him back. I want to see who dares to snatch food from the tiger's mouth in the hands of the 9 heavens. Humph! When Wang Xian flew in, an angry voice came from behind. Before Wang Xian could think further, a vast force came from inside. 2 blades of grass. 2 ordinary blades of grass. The blades of grass were the size of a palm and emitted an incomparably green glow. The moment he entered, the 2 blades of grass unleashed an incomparably vast attack. A god that can rival a wisp of divine fire! Wang Xian's pupils constricted slightly. His arm immediately transformed into a dragon claw and struck out. Boom! The 2 blades of grass landed on the dragon claw and made a silent collision, causing Wang Xian's arm to go slightly numb. What kind of creature is this? Wang Xian's expression changed slightly as his gaze locked onto the 2 blades of grass. Seeing that Wang Xian was not injured at all, the blades of grass trembled and flew backward. You still want to escape? Wang Xian's body froze as the aura of the ancestral tree was emitted from his body. The 2 grasses trembled. Their movements were slightly stiff and they were trembling. Star grass, godly state, has recognized its master. A single grass could destroy the sun, moon, and stars. The information of the 2 grasses instantly appeared in Wang Xian's mind. Chapter 1828. 1828 Father 1828? Daughter? Go. A single blade of grass can destroy the sun, moon, and stars. When Wang Xian saw the message of the 2 blades of grass, he was astonished. Star grass, a single blade of grass could destroy the sun, moon, and stars. How domineering and arrogant was this? This is a divine weapon. No, it seems to be even more powerful than a divine weapon. Wang Xian's eyes were burning with excitement. The 2 blades of grass could ignite a wisp of divine fire. This attack was too terrifying. Buzz. Wang Xian raised his dragon claw and grabbed at the 2 stalks of star grass. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, the 2 stalks of grass seemed to have mustered up a great amount of courage and quickly ran into the distance. Huh! Wang Xian was slightly puzzled. Then, he recalled the information behind the 2 stalks of star grass and realized that they had recognized him as their master. Could it be that there are creatures inside? Or perhaps there are treasures? He looked into the depths of the crack. The position inside was emitting a terrifying spiritual energy. Apart from the spiritual energy, there was also a refreshing fragrance. The fragrance was pleasant and refreshing. He could vaguely see some colorful flowers inside. Without any hesitation, he flew straight into the crack. Splash, splash. The crack was very deep and was at least 5,000 to 6,000 meters deep. As he got closer, Wang Xian could hear the sound of dripping water. The entire space was not very big. It was only 200 to 300 square meters. The surrounding beautiful flowers were emitting a refreshing fragrance. In the middle of the crack, there was a small pond. A root was poking out from the center of the ancient land of Jade Lake. At this moment, drops of spiritual liquid were dripping from the end of the root in the middle of the pond. In the middle of the pond, there was such a lotus flower. At this moment, the 2-star grass were suspended in the air above the lotus flower. They were emitting a bright and sharp light as they stared at Wang Xian. There are more treasures! When Wang Xian saw the huge lotus flower, an excited look appeared on his face. He moved his body and flew directly towards the lotus flower. Whoosh! Whoosh! When the 2-star grass saw Wang Xian flying over, a light flashed and an incomparably sharp light slashed towards him. You still dare to attack? When he saw the 2-star grasses attacking again, a hint of surprise appeared on Wang Xian's face. Trap! He moved his arm and a grayish cage directly trapped the 2-star grasses. No matter how they attacked, they were unable to break the cage. These 2-star grasses seemed to be protecting something. Was it that lotus flower? Wang Xian thought to himself. With a wave of his arm, he grabbed the cage and flew to the sky above the lotus flower. However, when Wang Xian saw the situation inside the 2-meter-long lotus flower, his face stiffened slightly. Two babies with pink faces, were lying in the middle of the lotus flower. The 2 babies looked to be about 6 to 7 months old. They were hugging a withered yellow branch and looked like they were sleeping soundly. The spiritual liquid in the pool was slowly injected into their bodies. Their bodies contained an incomparably majestic power. Divine blood? 2 girls! Wang Xian sized up the 2 baby girls and his expression changed slightly. He thought that there would be treasures inside, but he didn't expect it to be 2 baby girls. The dragon eyes of the yin-yang and 5 elements sized up the 2 baby girls. Wang Xian's expression changed slightly. There's no life force. These are dead babies. His expression changed. He approached the huge lotus and placed his palm on one of the babies. Indeed, there was no life force. No matter how much spiritual energy was injected into the baby, it would not be revived. His gaze landed on the yellow branch that the 2 babies were hugging. God-striking branch? It had withered and died. This branch is even stronger than the star grass. Is it on the same level as the indestructible wood? When he saw the information on this branch, Wang Xian's eyes lit up with joy. He immediately took it over. Without any resistance, he snatched it away from the 2 babies. Whoosh! 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 Bang! 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 When he picked up the god-striking branch, the star grass that was trapped in the 5 elements cage by the side began to collide violently. It was as if they were protecting something. The owners of these 2-star grass should be these 2 baby girls. Wang Xian thought to himself as he looked at the god-striking branches in his hands. Buzz! A strong life force was emitted from the spot on his chest. A green light enveloped the god-striking branches. Treasure! Wang Xian was delighted when he saw the ancestral tree's reaction. Plants that could make the ancestral tree react had a heaven-defying function. The god-striking tree was slowly sucked into his chest. At the same time, he sensed that he was in the Dragon Palace's Dragon King Hall. The ancestral tree that had grown to a few hundred meters in size had a branch growing out from the branch below. The branch was filled with barbs and was extremely green like a whip. This branch was located below the branches of the endless wood and the evergreen tree. It seemed like its level was not as high as the endless wood. However, when this god-slaying branch appeared in the ancestral tree, the entire ancestral tree gave off a sharp feeling. At the same time, Aoshingmu, who was preparing to ignite the divine fire, condense the divine spark, and lift the divine kingdom in the dragon transformation pool, suddenly trembled. His body began to emit a bright green light. The roots under his body were swept by a bright and sharp green light. As the green glow swept past, sharp barbs appeared on the roots under his body. Slowly, the barbs retracted as though they had not appeared. Aoshingmu's entire body became even sharper. Buzz. In the ancient land of Jade Lake, Wang Xian moved his arms slightly and a whip appeared in his hand. The whip looked very ordinary, like a branch. With a move of his arm, a green glow flashed on the whip and barbs appeared. Wang Xian revealed a hint of surprise on his face. This god-striking branch was completely different from the eternal tree's thunderwood. This could be used in a battle. The power on it was a little strange. Bang, bang, bang! At this moment, an even stronger sound of collision was heard from the five elements cage. Wang Xian swept his gaze over and realized that the two star grass seemed to be very anxious. He looked at the two baby girls in the lotus flower and frowned again. The two baby girls' rosy bodies had turned colorless. Even their bodies seemed to have withered. What's going on? Are they going to die? Wang Xian was slightly surprised. He looked at the two baby girls and revealed a hesitant expression. Wang Xian was almost certain that these two baby girls were gods who had fallen in the ancient times. After the recovery of the spiritual energy, they were resurrecting. However, it was obvious that they were in trouble when they were resurrected. That was why they were about to die. When he took away the god-striking branches, the speed of death accelerated. I should save them. At the same time, I can learn some things about the starry sky and the ancient earth. Wang Xian thought to himself as he placed his hands on the two baby girls. Buzz. An endless stream of life force flowed towards the two baby girls from the position of his heart. Since the two baby girls needed to rely on the divine branches to resurrect themselves, then the ancestral tree would definitely be able to save them. When the ancestral tree's power entered their bodies, the two baby girls were once again ready, and a stream of life force overflowed from their bodies. Resurrected. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.